So the clerk has now taken up the question and heard.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the Monday, July 15th, 2013 meeting of the Lake Forest City Council. Could I ask the clerk to call the roll, please?
Alderman Schoenheider.
Here.
Alderman Novit.
Here.
Alderman Waldeck.
Here.
Alderman Moore.
Here.
Alderman Pandaleon is absent. Alderman Tack.
Here.
Alderman Reisenberg.
Here.
Alderman Palmer.
Here.
Alderman Adelman.
Here. 8
present, 1 absent. Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Biddy. Would everyone rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First item on the agenda this evening is comments by mayor. We're going to make a little bit of a change to the agenda if we can this evening, as I know we have quite a few folks that would like to speak on the assault weapons discussion we had 2 weeks ago. And we as a council certainly want to recognize and give some folks a chance to talk. I'd like to make a couple of prepared comments. The plan, I think, will be at this point, I'll make some comments. I'll ask Alderman for some specific comments, and then we will go ahead and get input from the public and residents that are here tonight. Before I begin my comments, I'm going to do what we did 2 weeks ago, which is I'm going to lay a few ground rules. We obviously are here talking about an important topic, a topic that is certainly on the minds of a lot of us this evening, certainly, but a topic that just a few short weeks ago wasn't even on the community's agenda. So I'm asking tonight that, again, we I'm going to limit each conversation, each speaker to no more than 3 minutes. I'd like to have us be completely done by 8:15, and I will cut off conversation at 8:15. I'd like to have you please keep in mind that if for some reason the 3 people that were ahead of you said the same thing you're going to say, please consider whether or not you want to come up and say the same thing. We also tonight have a very full council agenda above and beyond this topic, so I would ask everyone to please be considerate of that. So we will go ahead in just a moment and start that process. What I'd like to do right now is read a prepared statement that addresses this particular issue. At our July 1st City Council meeting, we had an extensive discussion about the possibility of enacting a local ordinance regulating assault weapons in Lake Forest. This was not a topic on the community's agenda until the state announced that home rule municipalities, such as Lake Forest, would have a brief 10-day window to craft city-based regulations if they so desired. The state forced this topic to the forefront for debate in home rule communities such as ours, in an effort to institute a patchwork system in Illinois. The council and the staff of the last few weeks have received literally hundreds of emails and phone calls on this topic. And I would like to thank the council and the staff and the residents of this community for their thoughtful and civil discussion on this topic. On the evening of the 1st, the council decided to table the ordinance that was before it. While a clear majority of the council was opposed to an outright ban or significant restrictions, the primary reason to table the ordinance was to explore the possibility of retaining our home rule control on this matter without placing any undue, illegal, or unconstitutional restrictions on our residents. After further discussions with the staff, the city attorney, and among the individual members of the council, it was decided that a placeholder option, which is what we had talked about, was simply not viable. There were several reasons for that decision, and they included an inability to truly define what an assault weapon is, an ordinance proposed that would have allowed us to retain home rule authority on this appeared still to be too restrictive to risk legal action for the city. Additionally, any ordinance passed by this body could still be overridden in Springfield by a supermajority of the legislature, much like the governor's amendatory veto was last week. And finally, the decision to not exercise our home rule authority on this issue would in no manner impact our broader home rule position relative to other financial or operational issues within the city. After discussing this matter individually with members of the City Council, it seems clear that this is an issue that cannot effectively be addressed at the local level and should be addressed by the state. I asked Alderman Moore and Alderman Palmer to develop a draft ordinance to this end, but unfortunately, it just wasn't able to be done. And because I've concluded there's not sufficient consensus for the council to consider adoption of any ordinance this evening, I've directed staff not to place this matter on tonight's agenda for consideration. However, due to the recent outpouring of emails and phone calls on the subject, with the consent of the City Council, I'll ask the matter be taken up this time by advancing item 8, which is additional items for council discussion at this point. So that is my prepared statement. Hopefully there's some clarity there as to why the item is not on the agenda this evening. And I'd like to go to the council at this point and ask for comments, if there are some, further clarification and comments by Alderman. I first go to Alderman Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm speaking as the senior alderman, both by age and by length of service. I'm also a lawyer. At the beginning of my legal career, I was a law clerk on the Illinois Supreme Court, which stands in the same position to the Illinois Constitution as the United States Supreme Court does to the Constitution of the United States. I was a trial lawyer, so I have a very good idea of the expense and other issues that are involved in litigation. Indeed, Mayor Rummel appointed me to be the first chairman of the Lake Forest Legal Committee with the avowed goal of saving over $100,000 a year that we were paying to Mr. Filippini's law firm in litigation, and having a cost-benefit analysis done between anything that our outside counsel said and the City Council, so that we could independently give an opinion to the City Council whether it made sense to do this. We also have 3 other lawyers on this council. Alderman Adelman, Alderman Waldeck, Alderman Novit. Half of our council are lawyers. I think this is terrific. All of them are extremely bright, extremely experienced. You have a great benefit just by that fact in this council in considering what was just before us. I'm also director of the Chicago Crime Commission, and I'm very, very aware of problems with gun violence. So I take that issue very seriously. We are aware of it, and we try to do everything we can on it at the Crime Commission. I also have 2 sons in the United States Marine Corps who have served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and during their time there carried a rifle called an M16, which looks exactly like one of the rifles on the list of assault rifles. The M16, however, has a selector switch that allows it to be flipped and fire 3 round bursts every time you press the trigger. That is a weapon that is used in assaults. The other weapon is not used by the military in assaults. It is a sheep in wolf's clothing. I would like to affirm everything the mayor just said about what went into our consideration. And I'm sure that all the other aldermen here will do the same thing. What you have to understand is the mayor has no vote in this. He presides at our meetings. He is the executive that sees that our laws, our ordinances are carried out. He summarizes what we have done at the meeting. He is our master of ceremonies. He is, at some point, our referee. He is our mouthpiece, if you will. His handling of the meeting that we had on July 1st was the finest job I've ever seen any mayor of Lake Forest do in a contentious meeting. And I've told him that, and I would like to make that comment public. I think we are very lucky to have such a man, and he has my complete support. And also, I wish him happy birthday, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you,
It is his birthday today, just so I can embarrass him. So the mayor is the one who sets the agenda based upon what we or what the staff may request. In this case, the mayor asked for full public discussion on this matter. But it is the 8 of us, it is the 8 aldermen who actually make the law. The mayor does not make the law. He can break a tie, but he does not make the law, and he cannot veto what we do. So perhaps it's best for the aldermen to talk to you directly on this tonight. The question is, why is there nothing on the agenda tonight about assault weapons? First question I would ask is, how many of you were not at the prior meeting? Can I have a show of hands? Okay. Did some of you reading because I saw the article that ran in the Patch the following day, did some of you have the impression that we were going to discuss the whole thing tonight and we'd really done nothing that night? Because if you did, you were disserved by the Patch. Its reporter wrote an article after he had not even attended the meeting. The original article said that we had granted first reading to an assault weapon ban. In fact, we had never even considered a ban, and we had not granted first reading to anything. He corrected the article and said that we had tabled it, which sounded like we'd tabled the whole thing. And if you can, I think they've pulled the article offline, but I have a copy. At the end of the article, there was a retraction. There was a retraction that basically by the Patch saying, our first article was wrong. We said this, it wasn't. We said this, it wasn't. I don't know how often you see a paper say, the article we just ran was bogus. And I think it's unfortunate in this community where our citizens have to either make the choice of not reading the Patch and being uninformed, or reading it and being misinformed. So if you got your information from the Patch as opposed to attending the meeting and were disappointed as to what happened, it's not our fault. That's the fault of the local press. When we had the meeting, Manager Kiley started the meeting by announcing we would be given 3 choices: to completely ban assault weapons, to regulate them in some way, or to do nothing and allow the state to take over the issue of what should be done with assault weapons. At the very beginning, it was announced there was no interest in trying to completely ban. So what was going to be discussed was either enacting the ordinance that our staff, Mr. Filippini, had given us, or doing nothing. When I came to that meeting, I had not discussed with any of my other aldermen what I was going to say or what they were going to say. What you saw at that meeting was all of us having a discussion among ourselves in front of you. It was the ultimate government in the sunshine. Unlike some other governments around here, we did not meet beforehand, decide what we were going to do, come up here, allow you to speak, and then tell you. It was a fluid discussion. Moreover, we took about 1 hour to allow public comment. There were 26 people who spoke, in addition to the emails we got. And I will tell you, in case there's a misimpression, we don't decide what laws to make based on how many people address us at public meetings. We will address your point because we know it's a point. We get emails, we get letters, we get other ways to do it. So it's not a head count. And we won't do it because you try to intimidate us. We will do what we think is right for the city of Lake Forest. And we will put our personal prejudices behind that to look at everything. So Alderman Novit is openly in favor of gun control, and he's made that known. And he is with us together on this. So, and that's because it's not just an issue, should we control guns or not? There are a lot of other issues here, including the cost of litigation, which, again, I'm very familiar with. So we had the ordinance presented to us. We discussed it at length. None of the lawyers thought it was a satisfactory ordinance in many ways. It was a very poorly drawn ordinance in my view, and on issues really not about even gun control. But our choice was adopt it or not adopt it and do nothing, and that ended it. After public comment and was closed, we continued on and we discussed a vote. There was not enough support for the ordinance we were given to even have somebody move to bring it up, much less have another person second it. It was dead, and at that point, we had chosen the third point to do nothing. I tried to clarify that by making a motion that we had done nothing, and at that point, Alderman Moore asked that we be given the opportunity for discussion. I withdrew my motion. We continued to discuss it, and after Alderman Reisenberg said, we're going to be here for 8 hours if we keep this up, we said to all of you, we will work this out. We will have staff give us other things to see if there's something we can do. But it was very clear we were talking only about a placeholder. We were not talking about any substantive regulation. In fact, it was Alderman Pandaleon who suggested, how about having everyone put a red sticker on their assault weapons? We had lots of proposals from the staff, including one that had, let's put a red sticker. If we would have passed that, we would have looked so silly. We tried Alderman Waldeck's proposal of having a statement instead of an ordinance, that we reserve our right to regulate assault weapons in the future. We were advised by Mr. Filippini, this was a non-starter. It wouldn't hold water, and if we passed it and then later tried to regulate assault weapons, we would be sued for violating, for not having the power to do it. We didn't, a really big driving force on this, one, is we were not going to get in the middle of a fight that someone else was better to handle, and we don't have the funds to. And I would say for all of you, when you go home, I want you to watch the Finance Committee that preceded this. Lake Forest Lake Forest has always been careful about its finances. We're not rolling in dough. We are planning out, 20 years in the future. And this isn't something we can indulge because people have emotions about it. We really try to do everything, and at the end of the day, we are fiduciaries for your finances as much as anything. So when we had all these discussions among ourselves, and because of the Open Meetings Act, we can't get into a room and sit around a table and talk. We have to talk one-on-one. So I would have to call Alderman Waldeck or Alderman Adelman. We were all and it's the most inefficient way possible, but that's what the Open Meetings Act requires. Mr. Kiley or Mr. Filippini, they don't have that issue. They can do blast emails to all of us, and that saves some time because we all get the proposed ordinances together, but then one by one, or we could send something to Mr. Kiley and say, will you, who are not subject to the Open Meetings Act, now distribute this? But it's a really time-consuming process. And we devoted a lot of time to it. We knocked ourselves out on this for you guys. And we really wanted to make sure we'd examined every possible alternative and that at the end, it was the right thing for Lake Forest. So here we are tonight, and as you heard the mayor say, we have nothing to bring you. And what was left at the end of the last meeting was that this ordinance that no alderman would support, no alderman would even move to bring it up, was lying there dead on the floor. And rather than simply say, all right, let's move on to the next point, which the mayor could have done because the discussion on that was ended. We could not do anything, therefore we had done nothing. We could move on to the next item in the agenda, end the meeting, and that was the end of the discussion. But instead we said, well, we'll go back and see if there is something we can do. Now, I suppose we could have said, well, there's nothing we can do. Let's put that old bad ordinance back in the agenda. And here's the way the meeting would have gone. You would have seen the old bad ordinance. We would have called the meeting. The mayor would have said, do I have a motion to, for first reading or second reading of this ordinance. There would have been complete silence because no one supported it. Very well, we will move on, and that's it. I don't see how that's any different than where we are right now. And I think a lot of you may have misunderstood what happened, and you may have jumped to some conclusions. And I've read some of the comments that were made, and I think they're absolutely incorrect, and they are insulting to us, and we deserve better treatment. And you deserve to be more careful in what you say about us. I would specifically say that I have seen emails and I have read articles such as where the co-president of the League of Women Voters, Jane Partridge, said, "This decision has been made without public input." We had an hour, and Mrs. Partridge herself spoke. We had lots of input. How can anyone make this statement? What's the purpose of making this statement? Another quote, "Everyone in the audience watching TV, reading media accounts, or downloading the video believed there would be another meeting." How? I mean, I looked at it again. I mean, I can understand reading media accounts, but I mean, watching the video? How? So it's not that, I mean, it's not that we tried to do anything behind your backs. It's that we tried before we came to this meeting to see if there was anything we could give you. And there wasn't. And we had talked this thing to death. We had researched this thing to death. And the discussion we had on July 1, that was the first discussion we had had. You saw all of us talking about it. So don't say that there wasn't public input, and don't say we're doing stuff behind closed doors, because it's not true. In fact, it's quite the opposite. This isn't our paying job. We're all volunteers. We took time out of work and family to do this. We don't do this for anything but the satisfaction of giving back to this community. We're limited how long we can serve, after which we go back to being regular residents. We are proud to serve as elected officials of the city of Lake Forest. We are privileged to represent you, our neighbors. We are dedicated to doing the best job that we can. Whether or not you agree with us, or whether or not you like us personally, we would hope that you would at least be grateful for our service and would treat us with the respect that we would treat you if our positions were reversed, as they well may be. Thank you.
Is the other senior alderman?
So may I follow up? I wanted to say one thing about, when you're talking about the concern about assault weapons. I want people to put this in perspective. The state of Illinois, first of all, has on its books right now a statute that affects firearms of all sorts. It's called the Firearm Owner Identification Act. It was passed in 1968. No one in this state can possess any sort of firearm or buy ammunition without having a firearm owner's identification card, also known as a FOID card. The FOID card is issued by the Illinois State Police, who first perform a check on applicant in the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, an electronic database maintained by the FBI. Grounds for disqualification include a conviction for a felony or for an act of domestic violence, a conviction for assault, a battery within the last 5 years, or being the subject of an order of protection. The police also check the Illinois Department of Human Services database to disqualify any applicant who's been adjudicated as a mental defective or who has been a patient in a mental institution within the last 5 years. Mental health professionals are required to inform state authorities about patients who display violent, suicidal, or threatening behavior for inclusion in the Human Services database. The police may also check other sources of information. There are additional requirements for people under 21. That's on this book right now. Don't say we don't have any regulations about assault weapons. It's there, it's from the state. Also, the state of Illinois has a history of robust gun control legislation. It is the last state in the union to prohibit the carrying of concealed handguns. It only changed that after a federal court ordered it to, and that's the law that this was all part of, the Concealed Carry Act. I expect that at some point, the state of Illinois will get its act together and do something, at which point we will have a uniform law on this subject throughout the state. But the state of Illinois has access to much greater technical resources than we do and has much more money to spend on litigation than we do. And as to gun violence, far more serious concerns than assault weapons are handguns. There has never been a rifle crime in Lake Forest. Most crimes are committed with handguns. Nationwide, I think it is less than 3% of crimes are committed with rifles. The state of Illinois just preempted almost any regulation we could do of handguns. And they have a fairly extensive statute if you read what was just passed. We don't have that power. They preempted it. They didn't ask us. They didn't say you have 10 days, we'll grandfather it. They preempted every home rule community in the state on that subject. And I have no doubt they will do the same thing when they finally work out an assault weapons regulation. Almost all handguns are semi-automatic weapons, just like assault weapons. The majority of handguns are pistols, which are fed with preloaded magazines of ammunition that can be reloaded in about 3 seconds, just like assault weapons. These magazines are smaller. The biggest one I'm aware of, a regular one can hold 12, an assault weapon magazine can hold much more. Nevertheless, some of the bullets that these handguns fire are of a greater caliber than bullets fired by these assault weapons. The Supreme Court of the United States has held that the Second Amendment precludes a government from banning the ownership of handguns or requiring that they be stored with trigger locks. Well, the Supreme Court has not yet spoken on whether that would also apply to assault rifles, but within one's defense of one's home, I wouldn't want to bet one way or the other, because the Second Amendment came out at a time when there were no handguns. And actually, if now people can carry handguns concealed and you are trying to protect your residents, you may want a weapon that's larger, has more ammunition, and is more accurate. So I think the argument remains to be seen as to what the court will do on it, but we're not going to pay for that. We can let Highland Park pay for that. Although the violence in Sandy Hook and Aurora, Colorado involved the use of assault weapons, almost the same results could have been achieved with handguns or shotguns. And in fact, the Colorado shooter had an assault rifle, a shotgun, and a handgun. The Sandy Hook shooter had an assault weapon and 2 handguns. The assault weapon was his mother's. It had been legally purchased, and it was registered with the state. I think we all have to calm down about this and to be realistic and to let things take their course. I don't think this community needs to have a divisive discussion on the subject. The state of Illinois is a much better position. We know the governor is in favor of this. We know the lieutenant governor is in favor of this. Our own representative is in favor of this. Let's give them a chance to do it. This is not really something we should be doing, but thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Palmer. I would ask, much like I asked 2 weeks ago, I understand people are here, they care deeply about this issue. There are deep feelings on both sides of the aisle on this, but I'd ask you to hold your applause so we can continue to get through the discussion as quickly and as prudently as we can. I'd like to call on the other senior alderman, Alderman Novit, if you'd like to make any other comments.
I will, and my comments will be a bit more brief than Alderman Palmer. I come before you truly, and this is a difficulty I have, because as an alderman, I have my personal views. And I'm very stead in my feeling that there need be control of assault weapons. I differ from Alderman Palmer, but I'm an elected official. My personal feelings aren't always what I could put forth to the community. I have to represent who's elected me. And the community is the thing that I'm here to protect and represent. Dilemmas that I have on the discussion that we had last week, and I'm in the minority, clearly. It troubles me to a certain degree that when we left the meeting, and again, I'm going to push back a little bit on Alderman Palmer and the mayor to a certain degree. We tabled discussion. And for those who are here, tabling discussion and bringing forth an ordinance at that point, or having no workable ordinance, that could be interpreted a little differently for those who are present, involved in the meeting, and listening to the meeting. That could mean we're going to take additional time to create an ordinance that could be palatable, could serve as a placeholder. I'm an attorney. A lot of people in the audience that I see are attorneys. And when we interpret the Constitution, during the life of the Constitution, over the 200 years it's evolved, certain phrases in that Constitution have changed. The wording hasn't changed, but how we interpret that. And as we've gone through the middle 1800s through today's date, certain items in that Constitution now are included, not included. We evolve as a society. And unfortunately, the problems that confront our society are ever changing, and dilemmas do exist that, again, we have to react to. We've seen tragedies across the country, and be it they're sporadic, but again, we all want to react to them. And defensively, my reaction to Sandy Hook and other events that have occurred cross country has been that we have to rethink what we're doing as far as weapons go. To me, the difference between some of the aldermen on the panel and myself is that when I hear the term assault rifle, I differentiate that from handguns or non-automatic weapons or different forms of weapons. I'm terming this as the worst case example. Certainly we're not trying to limit all types of handguns, but we're going to be moving forward from this point in time. And be it 4 years from now, 5 years from now, the concept in my mind, and I'm the minority, is that we're going to have to react, and we may have the need to react. And the idea of a placeholder simply is that as a home rule community, if we're going to be dependent on the state of Illinois, that universally we all castigate, turn down, we look at in a very negative tone for their inability to deal with pension reform, laws like this that are thrown back at us. We may need to have the opportunity to react. We may need to lead, and we're giving up our ability to lead as a community. And the one thing that Lake Forest has had financially in this state, we've led in numerous ways, is that at certain points in time as a community, we don't want to be the norm. We don't want to be average. We want to lead the state and be better than the rest of the state. And that's an opportunity that we're giving up right now. And again, there's a broader issue that's involved in this than merely gun control, but it's our ability to react in the future. We've given that up. I'm in the minority, and I agree with council that there could be no compromise made at this point. But again, we have to look at broader issues. For that, I've failed you as an alderman. I've let you down as a community, be it you gun activists who want to preserve your rights. We may have to do things in the future that differentiate ourselves from the rest of the state. Can't do it to protect those persons that want to have firearms. We can't do it for the ones that don't. So again, I'm not satisfied with that. And I'm not satisfied as a community also that, again, for transparency, perhaps we owed you a vote. Perhaps we owed you an open vote. And again, that's a failing of mine because I couldn't convince everyone in this council to do that. I'm starting to go beyond my role as an alderman and maybe as a personal advocate. But again, you are owed more as a community. There's broader issues in gun control that I feel I've failed on this point. But again, as a community, we'll try. I'm, again, thrown a bit by what has occurred, but when you look at the larger picture, please acknowledge what the state has given us. And maybe it was intentionally throwing us a quandary that couldn't be resolved to have results quite like this. And that is to create a law that creates a 10-day window to have a resolution of meaning on a subject that has been bewildering groups of learned persons for a long period of time. Maybe it's the lawmaker's intent to make us look as foolish as we do or have looked in the last week. Maybe it's an intent to create a patchwork of laws, as was suggested by Alderman Palmer, so there would be a uniform law created by the state in the future. But certainly it achieved its purpose. And the drafters of the law in the state of Illinois truly should be ashamed of themselves. They've put us in a horrible position. But again, I truly believe, as I sit here, I can't look at you in good faith and say that I've done a good job on this. I haven't. This should be fully vetted out. It isn't. There's more positions, and I believe there's a broader cross-section of the community than was merely held last week or heard last week. I think there's an even split in this community, and I failed you to a large degree. That's all I could say.
Alderman Waldeck, comments?
Well, I want to pick up on, yes, thank you, and I want to pick up on one of the things that Alderman Novit said. I do agree that the state put us in a horrible position here. And I don't think that there was any way that we would have been discussing this issue had the state of Illinois not told us that we had a 10-day time period, which is a completely arbitrary and capricious time period, to discuss it. And, you know, I want to touch briefly on the process. I think the process here at City Council worked, and worked amazingly well. As Alderman Palmer stated, and I agree with his comments, and I agree completely with the mayor's comments, and I don't want to repeat them, although I will perhaps echo them, that we all came here perhaps with some thoughts and some maybe preconceived ideas, but we had no idea what the others would say. And I'm going to be quite frank, I find myself really in a different position than I was in 2 weeks ago. And it was through this process of listening to my fellow aldermen, to our city attorney, and most importantly, to the members of the community, and quite frankly, educating myself on this topic. And I spent a great deal of time in the last 2 weeks trying to educate myself as much as possible. And quite frankly, I think I have to admit that that my ideas and the proposition that I put forth at the last meeting was just not a very good one. And I came to realize that what I suggested and what I wanted to do just couldn't be done. And that any placeholder type of ordinance was just not going to work. It was either going to be blatantly unconstitutional or just plain silly. And at the end of the day, what it kind of boiled down to for me was I felt as though we were trying to craft something to protect our right to do something that we couldn't do or shouldn't do. And it just didn't make sense. So again, I find myself in a different place than I was two weeks ago, and I think it's a good thing, and I think it's exactly what's supposed to happen up here, and that's the way our process is supposed to work, and I support the mayor's comments and his decision.
Thank you, Alderman Moore.
I started out looking at this as a gun owner, a hunter. I don't own any handguns. I don't own any assault rifles. I don't care for them, quite frankly. I don't I don't like them, but it put me in a bit of a controversy. Because I thought I could see for a great deal both sides of the argument. I don't have any, excuse me, any loaded weapons in my house. I have 4 children. Everything's locked up, put away, and yet I own guns. To take part of the discussion, that would be one of the most difficult things, I think, aside from the philosophical aspects of whether we should have gun control or not, just parsing out the definition of an assault rifle was, in a large part of the rat in a maze feeling that we had, I felt collectively, of no matter which direction we went, and we couldn't come up with a good answer. If we controlled weapons to some extent, we ran into tremendous legal challenges and preemption by the state, even if we did have a rule in place. If we didn't, if we tried to do a partway rule or whatever direction we took, if we tried to really work on the definition, and we did a lot of work on this individually. When you define assault rifles, people who want assault rifles, just the gun manufacturers will redefine their weapons and change the cosmetics to be a little bit off. But under the current definition, I found about half of my hunting guns, including breaking double-barrel shotguns, assault rifles. And it was disturbing to find out that I couldn't write a definition, knowing as I load my own ammunition. I couldn't figure out a way to delineate between what I use for my sports, whether it's trap shooting or hunting, from an assault rifle. I couldn't write it down. I know when I can see it, but I couldn't write it down. That was one of the first steps I took. And most of the decisions in this topic were either, highly offensive or highly risky from financial and emotional levels. We got to where we are primarily for me because if we were as a community to take on this issue, we have a long history. I think there's between Kathy Cerniak and Mary Van Arsdale, I don't know, I think we saw the first version of Forest Park for public vetting 5 years ago. And I think that's the classic sort of public vetting that Lake Forest is used to. That's the kind of public exhaustion that we go through to make sure that we're doing the right thing. And I believe we've had better plans because of that process. This was an unreasonable time frame in an area with no winning formulas, in a process that would be either challenged by the state or challenged by some of us who would be made illegal by things that we would have done here. So I am in big support of not doing anything, referring this to a state or national issue, and realizing that it is nothing but divisive and impractical to try to handle this on a local basis. That's what I'd like to say. The last point I would like to make, and I've received a lot of emails, a lot of phone calls, and I would like to point out that what I received was almost right down the line 50-50. I know that at the last meeting it appeared that it was a one-sided issue with respect to comments, but I received just as many people who didn't want to allow assault weapons into Lake Forest as I did people who didn't want the Constitution or any gun regulations. And I would like to point out a couple of things. We are a heavily regulated, to echo what Alderman Palmer said, we are a heavily regulated society as it relates to guns. You can't buy Abrams tanks or Stinger missiles or automatic weapons or silencers. You can't buy a weapon if you don't qualify for a FOI card. And there's many, many more. There's a lot of regulation out there already. The other misconception that I picked up from the emails that I hope puts a couple of people at ease is is there are not people waiting to come into Lake Forest with assault rifles. Anything that we do will not allow people to come into Lake Forest with assault rifles. And some of the panic and some of the emails led me to believe that there were people seriously worried about people coming in with assault rifles. They're either, if you own one and live here, they're here. If you don't own one and live here, then they're here, but you don't own one. There's no wave that's going to occur. And I just wanted to try to put a couple people to ease that might think that after tonight, 1,000 people can run out and buy assault rifles and bring them back into town. That was what it was yesterday. That's what it'll be tomorrow. And it really, in my opinion and collectively from what I'm understanding here tonight, would be the opinion of the council. But I hope that puts a couple people at ease, and I hope you understand why I am where I am.
Alderman Tack?
I'll pass my time.
Thank you. Alderman Reisenberg?
I will be briefer. I found this to be an interesting process. We started off being asked to consider an assault weapons ban. From the conversation that I heard at the last meeting, there was really no one in favor of that because they knew that it wouldn't pass a legal test. And it just wasn't a practical thing to do. So we kind of segued into, well, let's protect our home rule, which to me, as I looked at the conversation and as I felt myself going, I was really trying to find a common ground. I don't know if anybody else felt that way, but I felt that we were really trying to satisfy both parties, and the parties generally don't have a basis for agreement on this issue at all. But I think we tried, and I think that that attempt took the form of trying to maintain our prerogative, our home rule prerogative. And then we left the meeting, I think, feeling that, well, we'll try to do that. Alderman Palmer and Alderman Moore tried to do that. I think we also tried to do it individually, and it came down to me as we couldn't do it. It just couldn't be done. We were we were going to come up with two things. One would have been an ordinance, which would have been totally ridiculous and totally meaningless in an attempt to make some people feel good. But it really would have been a ridiculous and totally meaningless ordinance. Or we could have had an ordinance which would not have passed a legal muster. Where I think we ended up was a triumph of practicality over passion. And that's why when I was polled probably last Thursday, I can't even remember, by either Bob or Don, that's where I ended up. We couldn't, in my mind, we couldn't get there. And that's where I'm at right now. Thank you.
Alderman Adelman?
Yeah, I'd just like to first remind everybody that this was initially supposed to be on our early or mid-June agenda. And when word started circulating about that, I immediately started receiving emails. We moved it from June to July 1st, and then the tone of the emails changed. They were accusatory. What are you guys up to? You're pulling strings in a back room. And it was solely moved to July 1st because 3 aldermen couldn't be present when it was originally scheduled, and the mayor felt it was an important enough community issue to discuss out in the open that let's defer it till July 1st when all 8 of us could be here. It's interesting the number of hands that went up tonight of people who are here for the first time and didn't come out July 1st when in fact it was supposed to be in June. There was ample notice. My point being, it's an emotional issue. And obviously the emotions got stirred when the patch misinformed people and other reasons. But in any event, I'm particularly proud of the way this council conducted our deliberations July 1st. And to reiterate what Bob Palmer said, I had not a clue what the other 7 of you were thinking until we hit that meeting. And it was a beautiful thing to see the public hearing process at work. From my perspective, it was all about preservation of home rule, because I, for one, do not believe that gun control is going to have an impact on some of the insanity that goes on. I have a personal friend from high school and then my early career whose son took a bullet from Lori Dan, and gun control wouldn't have had any impact on that. Fortunately, he's a survivor. So to me, it was all about preservation of home rule. And then the more I reflected on it and the more I thought about what my 7 fellow aldermen had to say, I'm thinking, what the heck, why do we need to preserve home rule on an issue that's best left to the feds or the state legislature? None of us are politicians up here. We're part-time volunteers. We're not professional legislators. What are we going to do in 10 days that's not going to look asinine and that's not going to get struck down by some court if somebody wants to challenge it? So I just came to the conclusion, let the state legislate it, let the feds legislate it, let them deal with all the fallout that potentially will arise from it. We passed a cell phone ordinance at your initiative, which I supported, and we had pretty good consensus here. Cell phone ordinance that we passed was because the state was going to pass legislation. They dragged their heels. We can stop accidental deaths. Nobody tries to kill somebody when they're texting and driving, but they do. Gun control, some crazy person, I don't believe any legislation's going to stop them. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Alderman. Let me go back. Everyone here has heard comments from council. You've heard my prepared remarks. Again, I understand there are people here who want to get up and make a statement, and we want to hear you. I think the council has made it very clear where their position is and where this situation is this evening and why the ordinance is not on the agenda. We are, as we said on July 1, and we said before that, and we'll say again this evening, this is about discussion. This is about civil interchange and discussion in the community. I would ask you to keep that in mind, and I would ask if you'd like to get up and speak, you're certainly welcome to. If you've heard something tonight that makes you rethink that, you're welcome to pass. You're welcome to not speak at all. You're welcome to shorten your remarks. I have a stack of 20 names. I'm going to start through them. Here's what I'd like to do. Again, I'm going to restate. You have 3 minutes, no more. I'm going to cut the discussion off at not later than 9 o'clock. And I would ask that if you've heard someone repeat your comments, perhaps you think about not coming up. I'm also going to ask, when I ask someone to come up, I'm going to kind of put the following next individual on deck so they'll be prepared so we can get as many people through, because that's the idea. We want to hear your comments as well, okay? First individual this evening, Jane Partridge, and Craig Storm, you'll be up next. And if you would identify yourself, your address, and if you're associated with a group.
All right, I'm Jane Partridge. I live at 1799 Farm Road, Lake Forest, and I'm co-president of the League of Women Voters. Council members, as you perhaps know, the League of Women Voters does believe that the proliferation of handguns and assault weapons is a major health and safety threat. We understand that not everyone agrees with us. That's okay. We also believe in democracy and a representative government. We would want what is best for our community. We do ask that you make decisions in public after residents' input. And I will say, I agree with you that the envelope that we were given was far too short. As the League considers gun violence a health and safety threat, we ask you also to view the issue from that perspective. Too much of this discussion has centered around the cost. Lake Forest is not just about money. The city's own video stresses family, education, tradition, and philanthropy. So please focus upon what we can and want to be as a community in relation to our health and safety. Surely there is some placeholder ordinance you can enact that can preserve our home rule while the state works out its kinks. If Lake Forest finds the need to change whatever the state may enact, either stronger or weaker, Lake Forest should keep the flexibility to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Craig Strom, followed by Mary Ann Wood.
Good evening. My name is Craig Strom, 346 East Spruce in Lake Forest. As you might guess, I came with absolutely no preparation at all because I was convinced from the last meeting that I was at that I wouldn't need to make any statements because the action of the City Council was their expressed action or intent was perfectly acceptable to me in either event. But that doesn't look like it's happening, or may not be. But I first want to say that I was at that meeting and I was completely satisfied and happy with the behavior and the actions of the board and the mayor, of the city council and the mayor. I had no trouble at all with that. You guys did a great job. And when we left that meeting, as I said, we were pretty much convinced that you are either going to pass a placeholder ordinance or none at all. And that's why you probably received quite a few less emails and calls from people who were in support of that position than you otherwise would have. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking of what you received over the last 2 weeks. I'm curious why the City Council thinks that the ordinance they pass has to define assault weapons if the state's law doesn't define assault weapons. I don't know that you need to do them one better. I'm not a lawyer, but I would suggest that when you answer that question, the state should also receive the same answer. They need to define them first. Let's see here. Excuse me, because I wrote this on my little iPhone here while I was sitting there. I think, again, the big problem is not assault weapons, as has already been said here. No one mentions, we all talk about Trayvon and the high-profile cases. No one's mentioned the 5 people that died in Chicago by handgun violence over the weekend. That's the problem. It's not assault weapons. I'm curious, in the proposed ordinance, the police chief has the right to prohibit Lake Forest residents from possessing assault weapons. That's interesting, and it probably won't go over very well. And then I'm also curious, because the ordinance doesn't specify it, what happens to the registration information, who has access to it, and how do they access it? And how long does it live for? None of that's specified at all in there. So anyway, thank you very much.
Mary Ann Wood next. I just want to make a clarification. There is no ordinance on the agenda this evening. So we are not considering an ordinance. We're not going through the ordinance. There is no agenda, no ordinance on the agenda. Okay? Thank you. Mary Ann Wood next up, Michael Shanahan.
Mary Ann Wood from 1130 Ashley Road in Lake Forest. And I recognize there is no ordinance on the table to be discussed, but you wanted home rule. We voted to give you home rule. And to me, this is one of the most important issues and reasons why home rule should be applied. We're asking for a placeholder. You have attorneys. We have plenty of attorneys on the city staff. We have plenty of attorneys in our city. You could come up with something that is constitutional, cannot be litigated, and does not restrict anyone's Second Amendment rights. I'm sure you could, because if you give up that right for us to do that, have that home rule amendment or home rule advantage in our, I'm losing my words, but if you understand, if we lose that right, we lose that forever. And I've heard many people say, oh, this will never happen in Lake Forest. We will never have a Sandy Hook or an Aurora in Lake Forest. I'd like to know who can predict the future like that, because I want a lottery ticket. So I'm really concerned about this. I'm also seriously concerned about the fact that we have ordinances that at our beach, you can't have alcohol, which is reasonable. You can't smoke, which is reasonable. You shouldn't allow dogs to run, which is reasonable. But now you are going to be allowed to have concealed assault weapons on the beach because there's no ordinance to protect that. That's where my children play. That's where our grandchildren play. This is the safety of our community that we're talking about, and I find it rather disturbing that and concerned that you put the cost of the litigation above the safety of our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Michael Shanahan, followed by Virginia Munson Meteor, I believe. McTier, I'm sorry.
My name is Michael Shanahan, 220 Keith Lane, Lake Forest, Illinois. As someone who spoke before me had said, I'm in the same boat with regards to the fact that I don't have anything prepared. To say I was also under the impression after the last meeting that this would not be brought up again, this wouldn't be something that we'd even be talking about. I believe it had been tabled and with good cause, and I believe their Second Amendment rights had triumphed, and that they were not going to be facing any sort of threat. So I did not come here with any prepared statement, and my phone is also dead, so I couldn't write one. That having been said, I want to get up here and I want to address a few concerns, if I may. First being, with regards to what was just brought up a minute ago about, saying that the beach is less safe because people are concealed carrying. By all means, if you want your children to play somewhere that you consider safer and you value safety by whether or not someone is legally allowed to concealed carry, by all means, today, right now, the past 40 years, south side of Chicago, it's been illegal to concealed carry. There's playgrounds there, there's public grounds there. Children have gone to play there believing that it's been safe and they've been killed. All right, so I think it's an absolute fallacy to say that safety can be defined by whether or not concealed carry is allowed on the premises. And I do not believe there's any valid argument to state or even support in the slightest connotation that the allowance of concealed carry on public grounds, such as the beach, would in any way pose a threat to public safety. Also, with regards to the ban, or not the ban, but the legislation that's on the table. They're not on the table, I apologize, but rather on the table out there that I picked up, and that was what I was meaning to say, was that it's out there, and I picked it up to read it and take a look at it, and when you guys say that it's not regulating handguns and that you can't regulate handguns, you read through that, there's an entire section on handguns with detachable magazines with certain features, including a foregrip in front of the pistol grip, or a muzzle brake or anything like that. I'll tell you what, not allowing a muzzle brake serves a direct disservice to the disabled and weaker shooters of this community, because what a muzzle brake does is reduce the amount of felt recoil to the shooter, so someone of smaller stature or a disabled person like a veteran can use a defensive firearm in a serious caliber without having to lose control of that firearm. It makes them safer with it, not more dangerous. And so these people have a right to defend themselves, and limiting their use of a muzzle brake on a firearm directly impinges upon that right. Thank you, counsel.
Thank you. Ms. Munson McTier, followed by Mary Matthews.
I'm Virginia Munson McTier, and I live at 975 Kirkhill Lane. I've lived here for 57 years. I've served on the caucus, and I've served on the Historic Preservation Commission. And I want to thank you for all your hard work and your presentation tonight. I thought it was wonderful. I'm not going to say half the things I was going to say. I'll just say I hope that you can prevent us from having assault weapons in Lake Forest. But thank you for all you do.
Thank you very much. Mary Matthews, followed by Bob Shaw.
Hi, I live in the 4th Ward. Alderman Palmer and Adelman are my elected representatives. So many of the arguments have revolved around money, and I wanted to point out that your responsibility is not just one of fiduciary to watch our money, but as an elected representative, your role is also to act on behalf of preserving the public health, safety, and welfare of the people in the community. And as a home rule community, we the voters determined that you, our elected officials, are better able to serve our community than Springfield. And as many of you have made a number of disparaging remarks about Springfield, I'm sure that you believe that you also can better serve our community. We do not know what is going to happen in the future, but I believe we should be as well prepared as possible, and home rule gives us that flexibility. Throwing away that option is not prudent. By doing nothing, you're tying the hands of future city councils, and I don't think that is in our best interest. And I'm not a lawyer, but I think you could open the city to bigger lawsuits by not doing something. in case something did go wrong. And this is probably not a good example, but I don't have any experience in it, so this is what I came up with. What if a fireman does enter a house and accidentally gets killed by ammunition from an assault weapon? If he had known in advance, which I believe this was brought up 2 weeks ago, he could have taken precautions. By your knowingly hampering future city council's action, is the city possibly considered negligent? And as many of you are lawyers, you may be able to say that that's not true. But you also know that people start lawsuits whenever they want. And I think you should be much more worried about an angry mother or spouse hiring a personal injury lawyer and going full speed ahead. I believe we do have some very good personal injury lawyers in town. So I suggest you be prudent, fulfill your duty to the residents of Lake Forest, and follow your initial idea and pass a placeholder ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw, followed by Stephanie Victor.
Bob Shaw, 4th Ward. Sandy Hook, Connecticut is the kind of town that Norman Rockwell would have sketched for the old Saturday Evening Post as a penultimate quaint New England village. On the morning of December 14 last year, my wife Mary and I arrived in Sandy Hook at the home of our daughter Laura and her family. What a shock. I don't know if you remember the time, but late morning. Daughter Laura, Newtown's primary pediatrician, had just set up a triage facility with her head nurse outside Sandy Hook Elementary, but alas, with no victims. Granddaughter Sarah had been inside the school in a room adjacent to the shootings. Our other 3 grandchildren were in lockdown in 2 separate local public schools. That afternoon and evening was utter trauma. First, meeting the grandchildren one by one at the bus stop as they arrived, with tears and hugs. Next, sitting by the fire that evening, mainly in silence, reticent to thank God for our family's safety while knowing that so many others were not as fortunate. No tree trimming, wrapping of presents, making of cookies, or exchanging of gifts last Christmas. The next week, daughter Laura attended 10 funerals of patients, as well as friends and neighbors' children. Also trying to deal with what to say to your grandchildren, to your children, what to do. And then the next few months, the steps of grieving, which wouldn't ever stop, with friends, patients, parents, community leaders, etc. The initial healing, most notably through a fun run on March 23rd, the first Saturday of spring, which had to be moved to Hartford because of 15,000 participants and 25 to 30,000 spectators in a town the size of Lake Forest and Lake Bluff combined. Then the Boston Marathon Tribute. Newtown memorialized 26 miles for 26 victims with a flag from Newtown at each mile. I'm very sensitive and very emotional about this as my daughter was the spokesman for the community. Then the race. Laura ran, finished, and was met at the finish line by my son-in-law Dave and our 4 grandchildren who had been sitting in those stands. This was Newtown's Sandy Hook. That was my family. But that could have happened anywhere, even here in Lake Forest. Assault weapons were the primary tool in Sandy Hook. But then it was homemade bombs in Boston, and it could be anything, anywhere. The problem is much larger than assault weapons, much greater than bombs, and much more than handguns. It is our culture, our value system, our challenges with technology, with global happenings, and in every single household, every village, every school, every church, and every organization in this country. We need the continuation of this civil discourse at the local level, right here in Lake Forest and in every community. We need to engage all constituencies actively, and this is a start. Let's not say tragedy won't happen here. Let's not say it's assault weapons. Let's not say it's not our role. Leave it to the state. Let's not say that our elected officials are not listening, are not engaging in dialogue, are not acting. But let us demonstrate leadership. Let us debate and pass some ordinance that addresses violence with a focus on assault weapons, but addresses violence, a much broader issue, which serves as a placeholder to preserve our home rule prerogative. In closing, as the mayor said in this summer's dialogue, and Jane mentioned earlier, the city's four cornerstones: family, education, tradition, and philanthropy. Let's continue this open discussion on violence, including assault weapons, as part of these great happenings this summer. And let's continue them with civility, respect, and courage. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Stephanie Victor, followed by Meg Barnhart.
I'm Stephanie Victor. I live at 1260 Fiore Drive, Ward 4 in Lake Forest. I prepared my remarks to discuss guns. I am a longtime advocate on sensible gun ownership. However, I'd like to not do that. People have done that for us already. But I would like to focus on government accountability and transparency. I'm very upset and disappointed at the attentiveness to this conversation that this city council has had. The notion of Illinois passing a concealed carry law has been a long conversation in this state. You had this document, this draft. I heard June 15th mentioned here out of your lips. You had time to research it. There is the Illinois Council Against Handgun Violence, of which it's given Dold and Kirk and others in this community awards. These resources were available to you, and you dissed the patch. Hey, Lake Forest, let's put out some PR, what's going on, what your thoughts are. Not just a small meeting of one or two people, then coming together, which I get it. You came together well and you made a decision, but you didn't let the community know. And that's a big part of why we are upset today. I found out about I knew well what was going on in Highland Park and Deerfield, and I applauded for those communities in getting together so quickly. You may not agree with it, but they did get together and hold a discussion. Yes, there was confusion about what happened July 1st, and that's why so many people are here today. They want to hear why this was waited on until July 1st. So in conclusion, I applaud volunteer efforts. I'm on several boards myself. I know there's time constraints, but I think the manner in which you have addressed this has been very poor. Next time, use the patch to your benefit.
Thank you. Next up, Meg Barnhart, followed by David Mueller.
Hi, I'm Meg Barnhart. I live at 1143 North Sheridan. I want to tell you I'm sorry I'm entering the debate late. I was taking my son to camp on the 1st. And I do want to thank you for your time. I know I do appreciate that. And I just want to tell you how grateful I am to live in a community that has home rule and that we have the opportunity to make a difference and to really make a difference and make a change in the right direction on this issue. So I just want to put my public voice that I would like to publicly support a ban on assault weapons. Thank you.
Thank you. David Mueller, followed by Beth Martin.
Yes, I'm David Mueller from 26 East Atteridge Road. I'm also an attorney in town with offices at 4 Market Square. I think that there is an opportunity, although from an imperfect statute given to you by the legislature, there is an opportunity that still exists to address this issue. By failing to act and utilizing our home rule powers, which were adopted democratically, we are missing an opportunity. And in fact, this is more than an action. This is one of the strongest and loudest and most terrifying actions that I've ever seen on a city council. What you are saying by failing to act and adopting a reasonable common sense ordinance, which whether you took it seriously or not, it's sitting out and has been for weeks available to the public. So this is what we're focused on. And that's a common sense ordinance that talks about safety, that talks about locking guns in a house, as you do, Alderman, with 4 children. I fully understand that, and that's a responsible thing for you to do. This is a safety-focused ordinance. It also allows you to refine it and develop it as it goes forward. But what you're doing by failing to act is saying affirmatively, assault weapons are good for Lake Forest. We want assault weapons in Lake Forest. We want them unregulated in Lake Forest. It will benefit our community. It will benefit our health and our safety and all the things that we enjoy. And I think I think that's ridiculous. I think Bob Shaw showed us what a fallacy that is. So you're not, by failing to act, you are taking a very strong action, and you still have time. You still have time to take appropriate action and to work this through. And I thank you for your service, but I also agree from a procedural standpoint that the concerns of the community were really with activity post July 1st, when it's very clear from the comments of the various aldermen that a very likely violation of the Open Meetings Act occurred. And Stephanie Victor, I think, pointed out that at least it was very poor communication that led to a lot of misunderstandings. But there was an impression that was left that the tabling of the ordinance was for the purposes of finding what was going to happen in the veto session, and that further action would proceed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I interrupt?
Yes.
Did any of you who are here for the first time tonight take the time to watch the video replay of our deliberations on July 1st? Can I see a show of hands? Who watched the video replay? 3, 4, or 5 of you. And how many of you are here for the first time? So don't talk to us about shunning our responsibility. If you come here tonight for the first time and couldn't even take an hour to watch the video replay of the public deliberations and accuse us of violating Open Meetings Act, I'm sorry, I had to get that out there.
Thank you. Next up, Beth Martin, followed by David Betts.
My name, excuse me. My name is Beth Martin. I live at 1379 Northwestern here in Lake Forest. Before I start my remarks, I do have a question. Why was Alderman Novit not on the committee to further explore a placeholder ordinance? Why was the most vocal alderman, Alderman Palmer, against any further action on the committee, along with Alderman Moore, who clearly was conflicted? By having Alderman Novit, we therefore would have had all 3 voices in the community on this committee to further explore what the city should do. And there would have been further transparency and further understanding within the community that all due diligence was done by the council. Instead, what we have questions and concerns that the ordinance was shut aside without any due consideration. There are many reasons I am rising to speak this evening, but fundamentally, all we are asking for is good, sound government. The state has given us the right, as a home rule community, to control our future just a bit in regard to assault weapons. We may not like the bill that the legislature passed. Each of us has our own reasons. But we have to play the hand that the state dealt us. Like it or not, that is what we were given. You are the city of Lake Forest, the city council of Lake Forest, not a state senator or state representative. Please stay focused on the task which is hand, governing this city. As I said, we also need openness and transparency in the process and a full chance for full citizen participation. One side will lose in this battle, but with full, open deliberations, there is less shame for the council to bear. Tonight, we are respectfully asking that you live up to the promise that our city government made when it chose to become a home rule community. Take this opportunity to allow the citizens of Lake Forest to control, to the extent that the current state law allows, our own ordinances with result to assault weapons. We know we can't ban them. We know we can't do much more than have a placeholder ordinance. But we respectfully ask that we as citizens be allowed to control our own destiny if in the future it becomes necessary. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, will you explain why there weren't 3 people on the committee?
Would you like to go ahead, Mr. Palmer?
The reason there weren't 3 people is the Open Meetings Act. So when you appoint any kind of committee, it can only be 2 of us. We did some original work, and then we disseminated that out to everyone, and everyone spoke. So the fact that we started doing the spade work had no reflection on it. We had a spirited discussion with everyone getting their views in. Thank you.
My name is David Betts at 321 Granby Road, and my wife and I are lifelong residents of Lake Forest, currently residing in the 1st Ward. Our voting eligible family of 6 views this proposed ordinance as a highly partisan issue, with its proponents masking it using generic concerns like home rule and community needs. Taxpayers here will pay a steep price if the city councils pass an enforceable law, as I will demonstrate with a copy of this check, court-ordered, signed by Mayor Emanuel from the city of Chicago to the National Rifle Association for $663,000 last October, with the same amount paid by the city of Oak Park for the legal expenses in overturning their local ordinances like this one proposed. And they are just initial payments. Today's leftists have several themes that dominate their strategy. The primary one is to prosecute the innocent and protect the guilty. In this case, it means making it a Class D felony to possess 90% of current guns and their magazines intended for self-defense, hunting, and recreation. It means forced gun registration that via the UN Arms Trade Treaty will be shared with foreign governments with the goal of forcible confiscation without compensation or due process. Protecting the guilty means keeping today's deranged on the streets in the name of mental health advocacy and overcrowded facilities, while blaming our gun culture for their violence. It means advocating for ever more gun laws while Chicago maintains its status as worst in the nation in enforcing existing gun laws with out-of-control violence amidst a corrupt gun control culture. The second theme of the left is their effective use of political terminology, such as getting away with defining for everybody whatever it is they consider assault weapons. Large magazine capacity is a must for personal defense, as today's home invaders rarely invade alone. They are often on drugs and wear protective clothing. Large magazines are most prevalent in smaller caliber guns favored by the women and the elderly, who require immediate stopping power to protect themselves from immediate harm. In all other 49 states, concealed carry laws combined with enforcement of current laws prove effective, as the Bureau of Justice Statistics reveal a near 40% decline in homicides and non-fatal crimes down 70%. Yet lies about our nation wallowing in violence on top of the political exploitation of massacres by the mentally ill and jihadists are effective in covering up the significant progress made against crime.
Mr. Beth, I'm sorry, I'm going to need to cut you off. Your 3 minutes is up. If you'd wrap up quickly.
Sure. Scott Drury, Representative Scott Drury, is a Democrat who is attempting to take what he thinks is a lemon and converting it to lemonade by passing sweeping gun restrictions with criminal penalties for those who disobey it. We must not work with such people. We must defeat them. As Benjamin Franklin said in 1775, and it's true today, those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Thank you.
Thank you. We are, excuse me, please, the hour is very late, and we're trying to wrap up as many as we can. I'm going to call on two more, and then we're going to close this discussion. Next is Fred Lane. Yes. Thank you. Roger Moore, followed by Joy Guscott Mueller. Pass. Ms. Mueller, thank you.
Good evening, Alderman, Alderwoman, Mayor. I too want to begin by thanking you for your service. I approached this issue from my 8 years of service on the District 67 School Board from 1999 to 2007. I too have sat where you're sitting now, and I too have listened both in council chambers and through emails and phone calls to constituents and members of this community and my brothers and sisters in Lake Forest who are passionate about issues, and I always welcome that. And so I really am grateful for your attention to people's comments this evening and the respect that you're showing at this time as we speak to you about issues that you may disagree with us on. As I said, I come to this having served on the school board, and I'll be frank, when the news of Sandy Hook reached me, I thought of our grammar schools and of all the children that we worked diligently at that table to protect and educate. And I think it is really worth your time and additional effort to make another go of it. There are 4 lawyers on the council. You have outside counsel. This is worth it. I know that a talented lawyer can come up with an ordinance that will work. I know you can, and I know you can compromise. I've done it on the school board, and believe me, we were not all in agreement. And there were times when I was in the minority, many times, like Kent is, and you have to compromise. And so I really implore you to do that. With regard to your concern about litigation costs, with all due respect, I think you all know that this city has chosen to litigate and spend city resources on issues ranging from whether McDonald's can have a sign out in front or even be in our community, and whether there's a Costco, or whether we will allow pot-bellied pigs in Lake Forest. And this issue, obviously, is much more important to the health and safety of our citizens. If you're willing to regulate the beach and all of the regulations you have in place there, you should be willing to at least put something in writing that there is no provision for not carrying a gun on the beach or an assault weapon on the beach. I urge you to come up with a placeholder ordinance. My preference would be something that's more restrictive, but I understand the compromise you have to make, and I urge you to go back to the drawing table, come back and discuss this and vote on it in open session. My suggestion with regard to committees, one way that we handled that in the District 67 board was to have 3 members on a committee, and the only thing you have to do is provide notice under the Open Meetings Act, and you can call emergency meetings. And that could be done here, it could have been done here, and I respect and value all the effort you've put into it, but frankly, this phone tag and exchanging calls, it may not violate the law of open meetings, but it certainly violates the spirit. And you didn't know what you were dealing with until the governor vetoed the legislation, but after he did that, we needed to have another go at it as a community to vet this issue. It's complicated. So get something on the books, and if someone threatens to sue you, you always have the option to convene and modify your ordinance. You don't have to go to the mat on it. This is a workable solution. You're brilliant, talented people. That's why we all voted for you, and I know you can do it. Thank you so much for letting me speak tonight.
Mr. Muir, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is 9 o'clock. We have a full agenda of council activities, including ordinances, other matters. I'm going to take the floor back. I'm going to just say two things, maybe three. Thank you for your input, for your passion, for your intelligent comments, for your discipline this evening. Again, it's an emotional issue with very strong feelings on both sides, and all of us up here understand that. I'm going to reiterate what several of the aldermen said tonight, which is I think we feel like we have done and continue to do our best. We've taken the information we've had, we've taken the discussions we've had, the input we've had from legal counsel, from staff, from others on the council, and tried to do our very best. But I will tell you, I am absolutely adamant about one thing, that we do not have anything to be ashamed of when it comes to how we've handled this. I am very proud of this council and how we've handled this issue. We did not have to have this discussion tonight, but it was important. And it was important to hear all sides of this issue. There's no question that 2 weeks ago, the bias was most certainly slanted the other direction. Tonight, it was, I would say, certainly probably more the other way. But it's an important topic. But I really believe when this is all said and done, as someone may have mentioned, someone's going to be unhappy and someone's going to be happy. But I truly believe that we acted in the best interest of the community, and we're extremely transparent, and we did the right thing. And we, I believe, as a council, are very proud of that. I'm going to go on. Next item on the agenda, continued comments by mayor, city manager contract approval, recommended action, review and approval of the city manager agreement with the city. Any comments on city manager contract? If not, I'll make ask for a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please, Biddy.
Alderman Novit.
Aye.
Alderman Waldeck.
Aye.
Alderman Moore.
Aye.
Alderman Pandaleon. I'm sorry, he's absent. Alderman Tack.
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg.
Aye.
Alderman Palmer.
Aye.
Alderman Adelman.
Aye, and I think we should pause
Yeah.
for 3 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a about 90-second break while the room clears, and we'll return in, let's call it 3 minutes. All right? Thank you. contract between the city and Lake Forest Public Works, Parks, Forestry, Cemetery, and golf course employees. Deshay?
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, this is the third and final contract I have for you this year. And it has been ratified by the LFEA, which is basically our maintenance employees. The PCA committee decided not to hold a meeting on this because basically what they've done is roll over their previous contract. This is an easy one. They adopt our city personnel policies, and they also agree over the 3-year period of the contract that they will agree to whatever pay increases the city council authorizes for the non-organized members of our employee workforce. The one thing they wanted was a labor management meeting to talk about uniform policies. So I figured that was a fairly easy one to grant them. We have agreed to give also the seasonal workforce, if they are working within the seasonal ranges we established about a year ago, to give them an increase, and that's about it. It's pretty much a rollover of their previous contract. It's the 3-year period.
Any comments, questions of Deshay? If not, could I get a motion to approve the contract?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please, Biddy.
Alderman Novit.
Aye.
Alderman Waldeck.
Aye.
Alderman Moore.
Aye.
Alderman Tack.
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg.
Aye.
Alderman Palmer.
Aye.
Alderman Adelman.
Aye.
7 yeas, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you,
Thank you
Biddy.
very much.
Deshay, thank you. Next item on the agenda, comments by council members. I'm going
If
to
I
ask.
could have one opportunity, and I promised Mike Thomas, and this is in response to, as we remember last year, we had dilemmas with the watering in the community during the summer, and I just want to remind the community of watering restrictions. We're not at a level right now where we're going to enforce regulations, but we do ask the community at this point, because we're blue on the scale, which is the non-emergency level, but we're approaching it to first limit sprinkling to days, odd and even days, and those days are based on the last digit of your street address. So if your address is 55, water it in an odd day. Even number, same idea. Sprinkling should be between later hours of the day. Sprinkling between 10 a.m. and 8 a.m. isn't permitted. For the sake of it, the rules have been enacted because the water used on lawns during the daytime is more quickly evaporated, and the city water plant needs daytime hours to replenish water resources in both its booster station and water tower. Also, be sure that if you have irrigation systems, that they're programmed to comply with the regulations, and reminding all members of the public, if you have a newly installed lawn or landscaping, you're exempt from the regulation. But right now, we're asking the community to voluntarily comply, so if in the next week the heat wave takes in, if there's need and restrictions or less water, that will have necessary capacity to make everyone happy.
Thank you, Alderman Novit. Any other comments? Alderman Adelman?
I'll be brief, I'll be under 60 seconds. While the golf course looks fantastic because of all the rain we've had this season so far, the water dilemma underscores the need for us to get that study done on a well for irrigating the golf course, so we're not subject to those kind of watering restrictions. And you had mentioned Kemper was about a week away from that study, so I don't want to drop the ball on that.
Thank you. Alderman Reisenberg?
The last two comments, interestingly, kind of tee up the monthly community forum meeting that we're having on Thursday, which is entitled Our Water, Where It Comes From and Where It Goes. The meeting is going to be held at 7 o'clock from 7 to 8:30 at the Gorton Community Center, hosted by myself and, more appropriately, the Lake Forest Collaborative on Environmental Leadership, and we certainly would like everybody to be there.
Is that a free meeting, or do you need tickets?
I got you covered off on that, so just so you can see me afterwards, I can take care of you.
Okay, but it's free to all
No,
members
don't
of
worry,
the
don't worry.
public.
Thank you. If there's nothing else,
Just one,
Alderman Moore?
I got it in the mail today, I forgot to bring it, but I wanted to bring up Lake Forest Day, because it's coming around the corner. If anyone has the details from the city, so I don't confuse them on television. The dates or the time or the,
August 7th, is that correct?
Wednesday, August 7th.
Yep.
okay.
Actually, Tuesday night, the 6th, they have I'll call it the Family Pass at in terms of the rides. Parade is at 10 o'clock on Wednesday, the 7th, followed by fun and activities all for the remainder of the day.
And because you were the first one to bring it up, you'll be asked to carry the banner in the parade.
Oh, I had to do that once when I was newest, so.
If nothing else, we need to open a public hearing on the city's annual appropriation ordinance and give consideration to the ordinance for 2014 and approval of rollovers. I need a motion to open the public hearing on the city's annual appropriation
moved.
ordinance.
Second.
Second. Any comments by the council?
Aye.
No, hold on. Opportunity for public comment on this matter? If not, I'll ask for a motion to close the hearing.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I need the approval of the final reading of the ordinance and the rollovers. A copy of the ordinance is available in our packet. Voice roll call vote, I'm sorry.
Alderman Novit.
We do need a motion.
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry. We do need a motion.
Move to approve.
Second, is there a second?
Second.
Alderman Reisenberg. Okay, now, let's do roll call vote. Thank you.
Alderman Novit.
Aye.
Alderman Waldeck.
Aye.
Alderman Moore.
Aye.
Alderman Tack.
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg.
Aye.
Alderman Palmer.
Aye.
Alderman Adelman.
Aye.
7 yea, 0 nay. Motion carries.
Thank you, Biddy. Next item on the agenda, opportunity for citizens to address the city council on non-agenda items. Anyone care to do that? Thank you. Next item on the agenda, items for omnibus vote consideration, and as is typical, if there's any item that a council member would like to pull off and take separately, we certainly can do that.
I'd like to take off approval of the minutes of the last meeting.
Okay. That was item number 1, approval of the July 1 minutes.
And may we table that until a further meeting so that additional materials may be put into it?
Do we need a motion for that, Vic? Or we just,
There's two actions. First, to take it off, it'll automatically be done upon the request of an alderman. We then can consider the tabling when we have completed our consideration of the omnibus agenda.
got it, okay. Item number 2 on the omnibus, approval of the purchase of FY 2014 computer workstations and laptops for all city departments. Item number 3, consideration of an ordinance approving a recommendation from the ZBA Zoning Board of Appeals. First reading if desired by the council, final approval. And consideration of ordinances approving recommendations from the Building Review Board, first reading and if desired by the council, final approval. I need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve
Second.
the omnibus agenda with the exception of item 1.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please, Biddy.
Alderman Novit.
Aye.
Alderman Waldeck.
Aye.
Alderman Moore.
Aye.
Alderman Tack.
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg.
Aye.
Alderman Palmer.
Aye.
Alderman Adelman.
Aye.
7 yea, 0 nay. Motion carries.
Thank you, Biddy, very much. And I
To table the
you.
approval of the minutes of the July 1st meeting?
have a
Second.
second. Voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, it is tabled till the first meeting of August. Next item on the agenda, ordinances. Consideration of an ordinance approving a recommendation from the Historic Preservation Commission. First reading and if desired by the City Council, final approval. And Director of Community Development, Kathy Zerniak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This is a recommendation that comes to you from the Historic Preservation Commission. This is before you because it is a request for a building scale variance. The Historic Preservation Commission is responsible for hearing requests and making a recommendation to the council on requests for building scale variances for all properties that are within the historic districts and for any properties that are locally landmarked. This matter was considered by the Historic Preservation Commission both in March and May of this year. Rather than place this item on your omnibus, because there is ongoing concern from some of the neighbors, we did place this on your regular agenda to allow for commission or council discussion and for public comment. I'm going to very briefly give you some background, and then I'm simply going to summarize the commission's discussion and conclusions with respect to the criteria upon which their decision for a building scale variance was based. This property is located in the East Lake Forest District, the original district. It is located west of Lake Road. This is Lake Road on the north side of Westminster. This is an air photo showing the a bit unusual configuration of this lot. And just to give you a little bit further background, this is the original layout of the estate. This is the house as it exists and remains today. The original access to the property was from Lake Road. Today that access comes off of Westminster. And this structure up to the northwest was the original stable, which exists today as part of a residence on Woodbine. This property was subdivided. The subdivision was approved by the city over 50 years ago, which created the various lots surrounding this property, leaving this the existing significant historic residence on the property that's today known as 950 Westminster. Since the time the property was subdivided, this house had no garage. The current owners purchased the property about 8 years ago. It is a bit surprising that a garage was never built on this property. The petitioners came forward with a proposal to construct a garage located in the northwest corner, which has a similar relationship to the service part of the house, the kitchen area, as did the original stable, which was located further off to the northwest. The garage will be accessed by way of the existing driveway and would be located back in this area. The garage, as proposed, does meet all zoning setback requirements. However, the house as it exists today on the lot that was created through subdivision is already considerably over the allowable bulk based on today's building scale ordinance. 800 square feet are allowed outright for a garage. This structure, to relate to the existing house, the structure is a two-story structure. It is a coach house. Although the owners didn't originally identify a need for additional living space, as the architect looked at this property, looked at the existing residence, it was determined that the garage really to fit well with this house, to really preserve the integrity, the historic integrity of the site, needed to be a taller structure rather than just a one-story garage. The garage portion of this property, I believe, is 829 square feet, so just slightly over the allowance for the garage. The second floor of the garage is just over 700 square feet, and that piece requires the variance. In addition, there currently is a screened porch at the south side of the house, south end of the house, and as part of this project, that screened porch will be enclosed, which eliminates the screened porch as a design element and also adds to the building scale overage. The overage for this property is significant, as has occurred with other properties in the historic district. Again, just to give you the context, the garage is proposed in this location. The existing house is in this location. The proposed garage, again, is designed in a manner consistent with the existing residence. There were concerns from neighboring property owners, not over the request from the owners to have a garage, but over the location of the garage, the mass and height of the garage, and questions about the use of the second floor, which is designed as a family room. Again, although it wasn't part of the initial request of the owners, it resulted from the design that was presented to create a second-story mass which would relate to the historic residence. At the March meeting, the commission reviewed the 17 criteria in the ordinance and stated support for this project. They recognized, or they concluded that the siting, the design, the overall character of the residence was appropriate and supported the historic integrity of the property. However, in hearing the concerns of the neighbors, what they didn't see was a final landscape plan. So the commission at the March meeting suggested that they were in support of this project, but asked that further work be done to detail a landscape plan, and they encouraged the petitioners and their representatives to meet with neighboring property owners to try and address the issues and to try and create a landscape plan that addressed those concerns about views of the building. After the March meeting, there were a number of meetings, or at least conversations. There were certainly some meetings with the neighbors. City staff was invited to attend one meeting, which was at the Svigos' house. Neighbors were invited. There was discussion about landscaping, and the group actually walked to the neighboring properties to get views of the location of where this is proposed. At the May meeting, the Svigos' representatives presented a final landscape plan. This is an enlarged piece of that landscape plan, which in particular shows the landscaping along the north and the west property lines. It also reflects conversations that occurred with the neighboring property owners, and there was a commitment on the part of the petitioners to do some plantings on neighboring properties. But the landscape plan solely on the Svigos' property was what was included in the recommendation from the Historic Preservation Commission to the council. In summary, the commission carefully looked at this and evaluated it based on the criteria in the code for building scale variances. They found that this project was consistent with the standards in the preservation ordinance. Again, 17 standards. Those begin on page 73. There's a review of those, 73 in your packet. Those standards deal with design issues, proportions, height, and deal with preservation of the integrity of the property. The commission found that the project as presented, the design, the location, the materials furthered the purpose of the preservation ordinance by really preserving the integrity. The commission noted that, in fact, this is the type of project for which a building scale variance may be most appropriate because it is a way of updating this house to encourage people to invest in the house, to really make the house livable for today. A house without a garage in this particular location really is a bit surprising. The commission found that the vegetation as presented in the final plan mitigated the visibility of the mass, found that it was sited to minimize the mass from the streetscape, and found that the mass and height of the structure were compatible with the surroundings. The commission did hear discussion from the petitioner's consultant that other locations were considered, both to the east of the house and to the south of the house. Also heard that one-story structure was also considered, but found to not be consistent with the overall character of the property. This does come to you with a recommendation, a 6-0 vote in support of the building scale variance. I do know that the petitioners are in the audience with their consultants. Also, a number of neighbors are in the audience as well, and I would expect they would like to provide some comments. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kathy. Questions from council for Kathy?
Whose house was this originally? Who was it built for? What famous person?
I should know that, and I don't, but I know that someone in the audience will be able to answer that for you when they come up.
Okay.
Mike?
How many square feet is it over bulk?
It is over bulk by about 67%. I'd have to look up the exact square footage.
Approximately.
The house today is about 49% over bulk. With the new structure and with the enclosure of the porch, that raises the overage to about 69%.
But you don't know, is it 1,000 feet over, 2,000 feet, 3,000?
I can look it up when I sit down. I want to say about 1,000 feet.
Okay. How can we reconcile this, and you know where I'm going, with 144 East Westminster, that in 2010, the ZBA approved 6-1, and then this city council remanded it back to the ZBA, and the people consequently had to sell their house. How do you reconcile this against 144 East Westminster?
As I recall, 144 East Westminster had required a number of variances, various zoning setback variances. I believe it required a variance from the overall lot coverage. There were some drainage concerns. It was a small lot, and the conclusion reached at that time was that it didn't meet the criteria.
Not by the ZBA. The ZBA voted in favor 6-1, and it was 285 square feet over bulk, and that's why this city council, and some of you sat on it, Senate, yeah, David, you sat on it, and Alderman Palmer sat on it, and remanded it back to the ZBA, who had to listen to the instructions of city council, and then turned it down. And the people were trying to convert a 2-bedroom house to a 3-bedroom house. They were told if they take down the garage, then the 285 feet would be permissible, and that wasn't viable, so they sold the house. And that to me seemed like a heck of a lot more of a hardship than this situation here. So, and I was in favor of it, so I don't want to be hypocritical. So I'm not going to say I'm going to vote against this, but how can the city council reconcile this petition against 144 East Westminster?
I'll tell you one thing, from my time on HPC, I will tell you that there were entire neighborhoods, when the bulk ordinance came into effect, and I can't speak directly to 144 Westminster, but entire neighborhoods were legislated into being 50 and 40, 30% over bulk. And the bulk ordinance was designed to, among other things, stop the rampant expansion of homes until they were hanging over the neighbors' yards, and help with the housing balance issues that were getting out of hand here. There were times in HPC when a 5% variance was inappropriate, and times when a 70% variance was appropriate. I also came to know a lot of the players, and I must tell you that Tom Reykjavik, did I say it right? Last name?
He's the architect.
He's the architect. Is I think he teaches this at Purdue or something, or anyway, at Notre Dame. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get it wrong. But
Somewhere in
anyway, we've had the pleasure of being able to question, and it's rare to come across a more informed person as it relates to historic preservation. In this kind of situation, the standards that we used in HPC, and I have not studied this case, but I'm sure HPC has. Every house is unique. You can't. Every situation is unique. Every situation requires a fresh look against the standards. So my only, I don't remember the situation with 144. I apologize, Mike, for not being ready for that one. But in these situations, I would be very careful to draw against a standard. Is the number too big or too small, or in this particular case, in a house of that mass, I haven't looked at it, I haven't driven by it, but the idea of a one-story garage, which would be more fitting, would look ridiculous next to a house of this size, just on the face value, if that helps at all.
A little bit, other than I happen to have sat on that ZBA that voted 6-1 to approve it.
I was on council at that time, and largely the reason was turned down. There were two reasons. One was the question of hardship, which in a zoning case is one of the requisites. And the thought was, well, if a family moves in a house that's a smaller house, they have children at a certain point, and they outgrow the house. It's a self-induced hardship. It's not one that would be something that would be appropriate at that point in time, or was approved by council to enable them to have the increased bulk put on the house.
Actually, the hardship was induced by a change of legislation.
Okay. The other thought was also, and at that point in time, there was a question by members of the council as towards preservation of the current housing stock. And again, we have a need to preserve these smaller homes, and if you outgrow the home, it's time to move to a different house, simply put. And again, we're trying to preserve that smaller housing stock so other families can move into the city. I think that was pretty much the rationale. Alderman Palmer was on council at that
I'm
time.
not looking to rehear that case.
But
I'm
just trying to reconcile, but hardship was a question that was approached on it. I don't know if that's a requisite, though, that was considered or should have been considered by this board.
Yeah, I don't want to get off agenda, and I have, I think, spoken to Alderman Adelman about this. I don't have a direct recollection, but I know there is an issue about keeping to the plan of the city. And if there's an area where there are smaller homes, and you allow people to keep expanding them, which in the real estate market that we had was a much more preferable thing for everyone to do than to move. And it was getting out of control, and we were losing the plan. We were getting homes that were too big where they were planned to be smaller. And we had to take a stand because it was happening, and we took a stand, and it was difficult call, but we had to draw a line in the sand. And I don't know if this is the one, but I do remember we made a point of saying, no, you move into a small house, understand you're not going to get a variance. You're going to have to move. And I think maybe we can do more to tell people about that when they start to see homes, or tell the real estate brokers in this town, you take your chances if you do that and you think we'll ever give you a variance, because we're trying to preserve a house just of that size. And if your family expands, you're going to have to move.
Well, I agree with that, but it's not a foregone conclusion that you're not entitled to a variance. That's why we have a zoning board of appeal, because there are reasonable situations where we grant variances. I don't want to beat it up.
I know we do have some folks here that would like to speak. Any other comments quickly for Kathy? If not, anyone in the audience would like to speak or make a presentation? Yes, sir. Would you state your name and address, please?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Robert O'Donnell. I'm an attorney. I represent Tom and Maxine Hunter, who live at 911 Woodbine, a neighbor to this, to the subject property. Quite simply, and I know you've seen in your packet a letter that I drafted to this effect, and I'll not go through it completely. However, our position is that that portion of this request, which is the living space above the garage, is simply not eligible for an exception or variation. In your bulk ordinance, specifically section 9-87D, it says that, and I'm paraphrasing, but I've placed it up there, that an exception or variance is permitted for a new residence or in addition to an existing residence. Well, a garage is by definition an accessory building or structure, and it is not a new residence or in addition to an existing residence. Now, the city's response to that from the city attorney was contained, at least to us, in a letter dated July 10th of 2013. And that letter says, in part, I know it's in your packet, that the term residence is considered by staff to mean all buildings on a residential lot. Now, in the memo that was contained in your packet to the council dated July 5th, 2013, the city attorney's memo actually says there that residence means residential lot. I guess the addition all buildings on a residential lot was added in the letter to us. Nevertheless, if that is the interpretation of staff, I would suggest to you that it's an inappropriate and unnecessary interpretation, because the code, specifically the building scale ordinance, does not need interpretation. If one looks at, and again, I put up 9-87D, which is the last section speaking to variations. If you look at section 9-87B, we're still in the same ordinance. It says, and alludes to one of the things one of the aldermen just mentioned, and I'm paraphrasing, is that the purpose of the bulk scale ordinance was to address concerns with respect to the scale of new residences additions to existing residences and accessory structures within the city. Clearly, within the bulk scale ordinance, it refers to those three elements separately: a new residence, an addition to an existing residence, or an accessory structure. To go back to the city's claim that their interpretation is the word residence means all buildings on a zoning lot. Well, if we look at section 9-87C, again, I'm still within the bulk scale ordinance, section 9-87C, which is where we see the formula for how the bulk scale ordinance is applied to various sizes of lots. When the city chooses to refer to all buildings on a residential lot, they do so by simply referring to this phrase, quote, all structures on a zoning lot. And that applies to each of the sizes of lots for which the formula varies depending on the size of the lot. So the city doesn't use the word residence, they use the term, the phrase, all structures on a zoning lot. And I'd submit to you that the city code does that for a reason. The word structure is defined in your code. The word structure is defined to mean anything constructed or erected, the use of which requires more or less permanent location on the ground, etc. So clearly, if you look at the totality of the building scale ordinance, it's to address new residences, additions to existing residences, and accessory structures. When you measure the bulk in the first instance, when it's first addressed for a new structure, for a new proposal, it refers to all structures on the zoning lot. It doesn't use the word residence, it very clearly uses structure, because anything affixed to the ground is a structure, and all of it will be taken into account for determining the appropriate bulk. Now, with respect to a variance, we get to back to section D, which is where I began. It allows a variation from the bulk scale ordinance for only two of the three elements that are addressed within the ordinance itself, for a new residence and in addition to an existing residence. It stands to reason that that was purposeful. We should assume it was purposeful, that one is not eligible for an exception or a variation from bulk for an accessory structure. In fact, a good example of that is this very project. One of the matters for which a variation is sought is taking a screened-in porch and enclosing it as a permanent room. That clearly is an addition to an existing residence. A variation is allowed for that if the city chooses to. But living space above a garage is clearly an accessory building. There is no exception or variance to the bulk ordinance permitted. Now, the suggestion is made by the city that we're confusing the word or misapplying the word residence and dwelling. That residence, according to the city, means all buildings on a zoning lot, and dwelling means something else. Well, again, and the city attorney reminds all of us in the memo to you and the letter to me that one of the clear rules of statutory construction or interpretation is we're to give reasonable interpretations to the words contained within ordinances and laws and regulations, and we're not to render any words superfluous. Well, if you take the word residence to mean all buildings on a lot, then section B, section C, and section D of the bulk scale ordinance contained many words which are superfluous because the one word, residence, would encompass all. Moreover, if one looks, and there are many dictionary definitions, and I looked at many, this one was available online today, residence, a building used as a home or dwelling. A dwelling and a residence are synonymous. We do not live, we do not dwell, we do not reside in our garages, but we do in living spaces above garages or coach houses, and we do in our homes. Now, if one does accept, for purposes of discussion, if one accepts that a residence encompasses an accessory structure, notwithstanding what I just went through within your own building scale ordinance. If one accepts that, then this proposal has another issue, because and the issue pertains directly to the setback. The setback for an accessory building, side yard setback, is 20 feet. However,
Wait,
there
what are
is
we
a-
looking at right here? I can't see the
This
top of the
is-
page.
I'm sorry. This is section 46-38 of the zoning code applicable to R4 single-family residence district. That would be the subject property. I apologize, and I'm just gonna.
Yes, sir.
And it goes through and it identifies the applicable side yard setback, it's 20 feet. But there's an exception allowed. And that exception I've highlighted, and it says, unless an entire structure is located on the rear 25% of the lot, in which case only 10 feet shall be required. So the applicable side yard setback for an accessory building gets reduced from 20 to 10 feet. However, if you are in, but again, that means that the accessory building is separate, apart from the house or the dwelling. That exception arises when you locate that accessory building or structure, the garage, if you will, in the rear 25% of the lot. The city gives a break with respect to the side yard setback. However, if here one is treating the accessory building as part of the residence or dwelling, then there cannot be an exception for the side yard setback, and this particular garage is located 10 feet off of the side yard.
Can I ask a question?
You may.
On the section 9-87D, you've brought that up a couple times.
A D or B?
D.
Yes.
You want to toss that back up? You've
I
had it
will.
up there a couple times. Do you have anything like that from the, the group that's dealing with this, the HPC? I don't think this is a BRB ruling. And
That's a good point.
BRB is a different commission. The HPC runs under a different set of guidelines. Do you have anything within the purview of the HPC that would address this?
However, and I think the city attorney will concur with me on at least this, is that the BRB obviously governs in properties that are outside of the historic district. Within the historic district, it's the HPC, but this is the provision under which this exception is being sought, even though that says BRB, and that's clarified in Mr. Filippini's letter to me and his memo to you. So, in other words, that, even though that says exceptions granted by the BRB, it applies equally to an exception not granted, but recommended by the HPC to the council.
I know I'm getting old and everything, we had an ordinance that we were charged to uphold on HPC, and I didn't remember any part of the BRB being on it, but Vic, maybe you could just let me know, what would...
Yes, in 2012, we did amend both the BRB and the HPC ordinance to posit jurisdiction of building scale exceptions for historic structures with the HPC. All of this had been handled by the BRB at one point. So
Right, but-
they are implementing the building scale exceptions for landmark buildings and buildings within an historic district.
But we did that before 2012.
It was in the ordinance, it was changed, and it was changed back again in 2012.
Oh, so now it, oh,
So I don't remember exactly when your term was on the HPC, but there had been a change in the ordinance where that was not specifically referenced.
so the BRB is the one putting the recommendation forward to us?
Because
Or
this
the
is-
HPC has to live with these rules?
HPC has to live with these rules in
Okay,
dealing
I
with
just didn't
the building
understand why it was,
exceptions, building
okay.
scale exceptions.
Sorry about that, I just
No,
didn't understand
Would
that
your
one.
clients maintain their objection if this garage were built underground?
My clients would not maintain this objection if the garage were one story above the ground.
Thank you.
The point with respect to the setback, it really applies to section 46-18, because that section says, and it speaks directly to eligibility for an enlargement to a non-conforming building or structure. A non-conforming builder or structure, which is non-conforming as to bulk, and is designed or intended for a permitted use shall not be added to or enlarged in any manner unless such additions or enlargements thereto are required by law or conform to all of the regulations in the district in which it is located. Therefore, if you treat the accessory building as part of the residence or dwelling, and therefore the side yard setback exception for an accessory or separate building isn't available, then this proposal violates the side yard setback, and it's, for another reason, not eligible for a variation from bulk. So to reiterate, we're only objecting to that portion, which essentially is the second story above the garage, not objecting to a garage, not objecting to a one-story garage, and no objection to the addition to the home by the enclosure of the screened-in porch. And to answer your question, Alderman Adelman, it's a 1,426 foot variance being sought without including any portion of the garage. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other individuals who wish to testify or give public comment? Sir? I'm happy to welcome former Mayor Jack Preschlack. Good evening, Mr. Preschlack.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members of the City Council and staff. I wanted to couch my comments not so much with this petition, but with the process that you're going through right now. This discussion here tonight plays right into my comments. I'd like to back off a little bit and say when I was on when chairman of the Plan Commission, we put this ordinance together. And the ordinance served its purpose very well. At that time, it was the first residential bulk ordinance in Illinois, and I think it might have been in the country. We had many calls, and Bob Kiley could attest to this, from communities like Hinsdale and Kenilworth that were going through a rash of teardowns. And they said, what do you think we should do? And our comment was, well, do what we did, but it's a little bit late in the game, fellas. You need a historic district and you need a bulk ordinance. Now, it came as a surprise to me when Tom Hunter first approached me about this petition that the council gets its recommendations on bulk ordinance variances from the Historic Commission and from the Building Review Board, both bodies of which are more concerned with the aesthetics than with the ordinances. And your comment, Alderman Moore, attests to that. When you said 65% is okay in some cases and 5% is not okay, you're indicating very clearly that the Historic Preservation Commission gives great weight to the aesthetics and to the way it fits into the neighborhood. But I would submit to you, and Alderman Adelman, I think, was right on the mark when he said the zoning board does one thing and the Historic Commission does another thing, and you lack consistency. You become the first line of defense for the recommendations that come to you on bulk. And I would submit that those recommendations should go through the zoning board. Nowhere in the definition of the missions of these bodies is the ordinance mentioned, neither the Building Review Board or the Historic Preservation Commission. There's no mention of the ordinances. And I think, Vic, correct me if I'm wrong, the bulk ordinance should be part of the zoning code. If it's not, we're lacking consistency in the way we implement this. And I think another example of where the Historic Commission may have fallen down on the job in this particular instance is they didn't ask for an intermediate plan. They didn't ask for a one-story or an underground. That would be less intrusive and require less of a variance under the bulk ordinance. So I know of a case where people built a playroom underground in this community because wouldn't have been in conformance with the bulk ordinance. So I think the bulk ordinance has been slighted somewhat because it's been given to two bodies that don't think the same way that the zoning board thinks. And I would submit that the Historic Commission could do whatever they do on these things, but then the zoning board should come into play to make the recommendation to you on the variance. Right now, you're functioning as the zoning board, and I don't think that's proper. The zoning board is there to administer our codes, and the bulk ordinance is a code, and I think it deserves that special attention. None of this is designed to be critical. It's rather intended to be constructive, and I hope you take it in that vein. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fresholt. Any other comments from the public? Yes, please come up and identify yourself.
Good evening. My name's Tom Hutter, and I reside at 1090 North Sheridan Road. I actually represented my parents at the HPC review when the Sfigos presented earlier this year. And my concerns at the HPC ultimately led to my parents' input on a compromise for a landscaping plan. We moved that through rather quickly so that, as our former mayor just said, we could have a voice. What was recommended by HPC was approved, and a secondary or another plan was not looked at. I would propose that at this point, we just haven't seen the plan that solves the problem yet. And at that point, it could be a one-story structure. It could be, I guess, underground. We hadn't really even thought about that. We recognize that there is a need for a garage on the property, and that's very viable. It should be approved in some form that there's a garage. The bottom line is that this two-story structure will be within 10 feet of my parents' property line and will be harmful to their quality of life and the future property value of their property. Please remember, this house is already above 140% of the allowable bulk. And Kathy, help me with, is it at 12,000 now? Sorry, I thought you were going to come back with it.
I'll come and respond.
Okay, it's a large house. It's a large structure to start with, and that if you're going to take a large structure that's 100%, 140% of bulk, and then move it to 167% of bulk or 169, that's just a lot, an awful lot on a small piece of property. It's literally a small residence in many other communities. I'd like the matter be remanded back to HPC, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hunter. Any other comments or questions from the public? Hearing, yes.
Good evening. My name is Anastasia Sfigos. John and I and our 4 children reside at 950 East Westminster. We have lived there for about 8 years now. We have a lovely home that we've restored to its original grandeur. We love it. We enjoy it. Our children enjoy it. They have friends over all the time. We have a trampoline. We have a dog. It's a great, and following the concealed weapons discussion, I feel like in perspective, we have no problems. I really do. I think about that all the time. I think about so many people have so many genuine problems in the world. Not having a garage is not the biggest problem in the world. It's a high-class problem. I understand that. But it's our toothache, and it is what it is. We have a beautiful neighborhood. And by erecting this structure, residence, garage, coach house, whatever you want to call it, It is meant to protect our cars from the weather. Our kids could store their bikes in this structure. I think we're entitled to it. The very people who oppose us having a garage have a 3-car garage. I know that legally it fits within their land or the dimensions of their land, which, by the way, used to belong to our house. We weren't around 50 years ago when it was subdivided. Laws were different then. Ordinances were different then. People lived differently then. We live in a day and age where it's kind of unusual that we wouldn't have a garage, especially for where we live. Again, I know high-class problem, but it's important. It's important to us. Also, I don't understand the concept of giving permission to build a garage underground. Thank you for your recommendations, but we're the people that are living there. We're the people that are paying for whatever is going to go up. I find it quite bold that someone would recommend a situation that they're not living with. This is our home. This is our money. This is the way we want to live. We are not offending anyone. We have hired an expert team of professionals. Tom and Craig are renowned in the community, if not in the state. We've spent a lot of time, energy, money, and we foremost put not only our interests, but our neighbors' interests. And what we didn't want to violate their space or we didn't want to compromise their homes or the value of their homes. We took all this into consideration. That's the irony. We really thought of them as well as ourselves when we were planning this. And it took a long time. We came up with huge, different ideas. We had a 4-car option, a 3-car option, and we decided we don't need that. Even though we have, we're a family of 6 and 5 of us are now driving, we decided 2-car garage was more than enough for us. We didn't need to have a 10-car garage. It wouldn't have been allowed anyway, apparently, because of the size of our property. But, so those are my comments. I am an attorney by training. I do not practice law for the very reason of what happened here tonight. So many different interpretations, so many ways of looking at the law, so many ways of deciphering what is what, and, according to this, but according to that, and let's bring out the dictionary, and that's not what's important. What's important is that a family needs a garage. We're asking for a garage. It's been approved by the HPC. No other neighbors have a problem with it. I would really like to ask our neighbors, and I don't mean to be offensive, but I just don't understand why you're so opposed to this, especially with the landscape design being in place. You approved that when you were over. You thought it was, fine. We're spending a ton of money.
Okay, ma'am. Sir, I'm sorry. I apologize. If you're done with your comments and you'd like to come back up, Mr. I'm fine with that.
We've done everything we were told to do and then some. And I'm just perplexed at the opposition that continues. Those are my comments. Thank you for your time. And thank you for doing such a great job with the city. It's been a pleasure raising our kids here. We're from the city. We just moved here 8 years ago, and it was kind of scary to us because such a different environment, but we've really enjoyed living here. So thank you for everything that you do, and thank you for continuing to make this a safe and enjoyable place.
Thank you
for
very
our
much.
families.
Thank you. Kathy, do you want to add anything after you've heard public testimony.
I can clarify the square footages, and then I will ask the city attorney to respond. The house as it exists today is 10,752 square feet. There is an 800 square foot allowance for a garage that obviously isn't used because there isn't a garage on the site. The allowable bulk, which is calculated based on the square footage of the lot, including the 800 allowance for the garage, is 7,969 square feet. With the addition of, with the enclosure of the porch, that adds 653 square feet to the house. And the coach house, the second floor living space, adds 773 square feet for a total of 12,023 square feet, which again is about a 69% building scale overage.
Vic, any comments from your side?
Nothing in particular. I would note that the building scale ordinance in its substance has been in place since 1989. The changes that have been made since then have primarily been the procedural issues, not the scope of the regulations or the standards for them. There were some changes to some of the calculations since 1989. During that time, as I understand it, the staff interpretation has been to treat the term residence to include both dwellings and accessory buildings. And on that basis, it's been presented or allowed to go before the HPC and now presented to the City Council.
Well, staff has recommended that we waive first reading and grant final approval. I think the council at this point has one of really three options. We can waive first reading tonight and then address the final approval in 2 weeks. We can do both, as staff recommends, which is waive first reading as well as give final approval, or we certainly, as has been mentioned, can send it back to the HPC if council believes that's appropriate.
Is there a way we can send this to the ZBA? I mean, I love these
Is that-
acronyms. I mean, there's a bulk scale ordinance that really is something, it's a zoning variance. And it seems that that's,
Well, no, I was gonna say, and then if you get the zoning, then the obvious question comes up of hardship or motivation for it, the compelling reason for the addition. The garage I could understand,
Yeah.
but the space above the
all
garage.
all I heard was garage, and that's a no-brainer. And I didn't mean to suggest you had to put a garage underground. I was just kind of exploring options. Seems to me a one-story garage solves it, and it may not please you aesthetically, but it solves your need. And I don't see the aesthetic thing as being a hardship. You know, you may not like the way the house looks with a one-car garage next to it, but that's an aesthetic issue.
Well, I want to interject here because I'm getting really worried about what we're talking about. We're starting to do what we did in boards and commissions, talk about how important the aesthetic is or where things belong. It was our purview, not ZBA's, to handle bulk overages in HPC for historic residents. It was not ZBA's. So that's why it happened there, is because it didn't belong in ZBA. For us to decide now that it should is uninformed, I guess, with all due respect, because there's a reason.
That's a fair statement. I am
No,
uninformed.
no, I mean, you know, it's and I don't know if it belongs in ZBA and shouldn't be in HPC, but that's something we could take up, but probably not while there's a pending issue. So I just, you know, I didn't mean to jump in early on. I have not been to the site. I didn't mean to jump in and say, you know, a house this big deserves a two-story garage early. I didn't realize that was the flashpoint, or I wouldn't have said it, and I regret saying it. But from the aesthetic, it made sense, but it was premature. Anyway, I just wanted to not to say I regret saying that early on, to set any momentum that was inappropriate, and to say that the rule of the road today, with all due respect, is that HPC handles bulk ordinances, bulk variations on historic structures.
Are you concerned that there are two different types of standards being applied? I mean, because.
Maybe three.
Yeah,
I'm not,
each
because
one looks at it differently.
There's a reason why the HPC took over or was given, or was, whatever the process, I'm using the wrong verbs here, was given that thing, it's because the aesthetic is important. It's because the Historic Preservation Commission is charged with 17 standards and 5 for demolition that to a great deal define the character of our town and speak directly to the aesthetic. And these we've adopted, we've elected to enforce and adopted, and they are important. And the numbers are less important. There's an entire stretch of vine from memory that was, when the ordinance went in, these were legislated into 130 to 140% over bulk. The minute the law went into effect, they were non-conforming. And there's homes all over Lake Forest that were put into, there's no other way to do a bulk ordinance, but they were.
David, the bulk ordinance from 1989 was revised in 1999 under Mr. Preschle. And it affected the homes in the various zoning ordinances anywhere from 11 to 17%. So if you were right at bulk, then you became non-conforming by anywhere from 11 to 17%. This house is 49% over bulk, and now they're asking to go to 69% over bulk.
But
it's not subjective. You don't have to be an attorney. You have to have 8th grade math skills to figure out whether you conform to an ordinance, the bulk scale ordinance.
But the house is not illegal because the ordinance gave
No, but we could make it more illegal by increasing it to 100%.
But I think that's the misconception. It's not illegal. That's why ZBA exists.
Vic,
That's why
did you have a
HBC
I'm
does.
sorry, hold on, Jack. Vic,
Anyway,
did you have
yeah,
a comment?
I've said my piece, but.
Thanks.
I would note that when the building scale ordinance was originally adopted in 1989, the council determined that it should be placed in the building code, not in the zoning code. Part of the reason for that, I think, is reflected in the standards for granting exceptions to the building scale. Under the Illinois Zoning Enabling Act, which applies to our zoning variance authority, that's where the particular practical difficulty or particular hardship standard applies. In fact, what exists in our building scale ordinance is a series of standards which are, I'll call them contextual. They relate both to the context of the area as well as context of the individual architecture. So the way that the ordinance was originally conceived was very much a matter of design, both of the building itself and of its placement within a neighborhood. The ability to get any kind of exception from the bulk standards was based on those standards and not the hardship standards for zoning. So we are looking at something different than a bulk ordinance that would be founded as a zoning regulation. This instead is a bulk regulation that the city council many years ago determined should be in the
The
building
hardship
code.
is not a prerequisite.
Hardship is not a prerequisite under our existing ordinance.
I thought.
Jack?
I hope a practical comment. I'm more concerned about the letter of the law than the spirit of the law. I'm more concerned about aesthetics than I am ordinances. More importantly, I'm very concerned about covering the back of the historical board here. They voted 6-0. 6-0. I mean, how many meetings, these folks are the most detailed folks known to mankind. And they voted 6-0. And somebody comes here and on the basis of several technicalities want to turn their back on these poor residences. I think it's a travesty. I think it's an absolute travesty. You know, we've had sidebar conversations about, gee, shouldn't we loosen up the bureaucracy around here? And aren't we chasing developers away? And why do we get in the way of practical solutions? This is a classic example in my estimation. Those are my comments.
I've got to respond to that, because what troubles me is the total inconsistency then how we function. Because, and again, I can't let go, there was a 6-1 ZBA decision that the city council overturned for bona fide hardship reasons. And so are we gonna become a city that looks like we do for some people and we don't do for others? How do you subjectively apply the law?
My grandmother used to say, 2 wrongs don't make a right.
I think the issue may have been with your prior case.
No, you don't have to talk about the prior one.
Well, I mean, the issue, sometimes we're here to really make clear policy, and I absolutely agree with Alderman Reisenberg. We're not kind of a super everything board. These people put a lot of work in this, and I think we risk losing any volunteers to work on any of our boards if we always keep overruling them. I don't think we're set up for that. I think our plate is quite full enough as it is. So I have a bias toward basically accepting the recommendations of the board, but it's not absolute. And I think if we're not, it shouldn't be on a case-by-case basis. We should be delineating, look, there's a policy here that maybe they don't understand, and we want to make that clear. And again, I would not vote for this, but I'm not on that board, and it's, for me, if you have a garage, fine, you don't need the 2-story, but I'm not going to vote that way because I'm going to accede to what was recommended to us and let them be the experts on that. And I don't see a change in our policy here. And if there is, maybe the other aldermen who know more than I can say, well, here's why we should do it here, because our policy is going to be changing, and we want to advise, the boards below us about that. So
I'll give you a good example of when these things work, and when we were on HPC, we had the Bear Woods project that came in front of us. And under HPC, we were charged to uphold the 17 standards and the 5 for demolition, which we felt weren't met. And hardship was actually brought up as part of that when it didn't really apply. And we voted against the project because we felt that it was our job to uphold the historic preservation ordinance, because that's what we raised our hand and told the mayor we would do. I, as one, fully expected it to be overturned by the city council, which it was. And I saw that as no lack of consistency. I saw that as a narrow purview of HPC and the wide purview of the city council. And the wider purview looked at economic development, looked at economic impact, looked at disposition of a property that had been difficult to deal with for a long time. And we weren't allowed to look at those things. So when we were overridden, we didn't, I do remember getting the letter as an alderman from you, Alderman Adelman, and you were, I remember you were quite upset about that. And you felt very strongly that we had made a mistake. It came back to me after we were talking there, but there are times when these things, when it's appropriate to come up here and override them, and I personally don't think this is one, but sometimes it makes sense. Sometimes that type of action is not an inconsistency or a selective enforcement. It's actually a change of purview. But
For what it's worth, I'm just a bit uncomfortable with us sitting here and saying at this time and place and date, after this much consideration by the HPC, not one but 2 separate meetings, that, well, now we really think you should just have a 1-story garage. There's something about that makes me uncomfortable. And I agree with Alderman Reisenberg's comments that these boards do exist for a reason, and we have to give them deference. And this was a unanimous decision that was reached after 2 separate meetings by this board. I'm sorry, then I'm wrong. I thought that it was a 6-0.
In our packet, the vote was 6-0.
Yeah, the vote was 6-0.
It was 4-1 in the first reading. So I know the one was my son.
Okay. Well, then I stand corrected, but,
I was not present at the second meeting because it was my 80th birthday celebration.
good reason to be
What was
gone.
the final vote?
6-0 was the final.
Thank you.
And that's what I was looking at, but I certainly stand corrected. So I struggle with this. I am having a really difficult time with this petition, but that's just what I keep coming back to.
Just let me say one quick thing. For me, this just seems to me that what we establish now with these types of decisions is that this really is a two-tiered system. If you fall into the historic preservation area, aesthetics are allowed to trump the ordinances related to bulk, and that's its own separate area of consideration. If you don't have the resources to purchase historic homes, you fall under a different set of regulations. Maybe that's okay, but that should be the policy going forward then, so this stuff never comes back. If the historic preservation group looks at a historic property and says, we think bulk is unimportant, or aesthetics are all that's important, then the decision's made and it should never come here. I mean, I don't think we should be going back and forth between these two separate things. We should just make it as a matter of policy. If you're here, these are the rules. Aesthetics are the most important thing, as determined by historic preservation. If you're over here, you're stuck with a more strict adherence to these mathematical calculations. I don't see how we can keep going back and forth, but I just think it's unfair to most homeowners. They ought to know what they're getting into.
Staff has made a recommendation that we waive first reading and grant final approval. Do I have a motion to waive first reading on this item?
Before you do, can I ask one question of staff? There's no garage there right now, correct?
That's correct.
All right, so we're adding to impervious. Storm drainage was considered? There are no issues over storm drainage and the additional impervious?
At the time, after approval, final engineering plans will be prepared, and those will be subject to the review by the city engineer. That normally doesn't occur at this point in the process. There's always a cursory review. No red flags were raised by engineering staff.
They did a
but
preliminary.
But that final review has not been done.
And I have one final comment, and it's just a consideration. Again, Historic Preservation Commission viewed this from, again, their narrow regulations, but we have a bulk ordinance that we're supposed to protect also. We are the final step, and we are charged with reviewing these findings, again, to protect all ordinances in the city. As much as I appreciate this, the HPC, and I think the result was within keeping of their narrow ambit, if we're not going to make the bulk ordinance somewhat of a joke, I think this needs further review, to put it plainly. I appreciate the committee, but again, I think the numbers on this are so overwhelming, it should be scaled back, my view.
Yeah, and I just want to add too, the HPC, most of their elements for decision-making are fairly subjective. I think we would all agree. They're not.
The opposite's true, actually. There's 17 standards that are.
Yeah, I've seen them.
Okay.
So I think, in addition to your comment about undermining the validity of our bulk scale ordinance, what we have here is a petition that's got admittedly two of the top professionals in their field, Craig Bergman and Tom Rakovich. And it just looks like, you know, if you come in with the best of the best, and they're happy with the aesthetics, they just totally overlook what the bulk scale ordinance is. I mean, to take it from 47 to 69% is a lot. And it's not like they're asking for an extra bedroom because they have 4 children and only 3 bedrooms. That would be a hardship, maybe. It's a garage, and the counterpoint is, and I think George Pandaleon ran the community forum on this, we are considering granny flats, and maybe one day we'll legislate granny flats, but we don't have that on the books now. But I think we're being rather extreme, and I think we're undermining the bulk scale ordinance.
I would like to make a motion as stated by staff.
To waive first reading. I'm looking for a motion to waive first reading only.
Waive first meeting.
First reading. Do I have a second for that?
Second.
I'm going to ask for a roll call vote, please.
Alderman Novit,
No.
Alderman Waldeck,
Aye.
Alderman Moore,
Aye.
Alderman Tack,
No.
Alderman Reisenberg,
Aye.
Alderman Palmer,
Aye.
Alderman Adelman.
No.
Okay, you're three.
Mr. Mayor, to waive first reading requires a 2/3 vote, so that does not waive first reading. The members of the council can grant first reading, which will put this back on the agenda for either the next or a future meeting.
So if we were to grant first reading, we'd consider it again, Vic, in the following meeting?
That's correct.
And does that require that vote, or it can simply be,
Well, right now, if we, at this point, we don't have either first reading, rejection, or remand back. So those are still choices available.
so do we need a motion then to remand it back again to a future meeting?
You could just approve first reading, and that will bring it back to the council.
Okay. So, and would that require my vote then? Is that what you're saying, or no?
No, that would require a separate motion.
Okay. So then I need that. So I need motion to
To grant
wait-
first reading.
Grant first reading.
I move to grant first reading.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Let's have a roll call vote again, please.
Somebody tell me what I'm voting on.
You're voting to keep this thing going.
No, I don't want to, but it's,
No, you
it's,
do-
be- it's
you-
better than the alternative.
You do
Yeah,
like,
right, yeah,
you do
okay.
like
Yeah,
that.
I do want to
Right.
keep it. Okay, good, good. Thank you.
Alderman Novit,
No.
Alderman Waldeck,
Aye.
Alderman Moore,
Aye.
Alderman Tack,
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg,
Aye.
Alderman Palmer,
Aye.
Alderman Adelman.
No.
That does pass.
Okay. So this item is then sent back to council again. You know, I guess, and again, I'm purposely kind of left out of the playing field here a bit, but I guess I might perhaps, without getting too far afield, you know, in the interim, perhaps reconsider the concept of just a one-story structure. You know, I think maybe you heard a lot tonight from the council that the biggest concern was not giving you a garage. The biggest concern was the height of the structure and what that did at the bulk. So while I'm not telling you have to do anything, perhaps that might be a consideration. Perhaps it might be a consideration to think about from a design standpoint as well.
I might also make an observation that it seems like this is something where we have a policy issue we need to address. And my vote was based on the fact I give deference to our various boards if they are following the existing policies and laws. And we need to give them some sort of warning before we change it. And as I said, if it were up to me, I would not have voted to approve this, but I voted to approve it because it was approved by our board, and it deserves deference.
I agree with that to the extent that I believe they're separate issues. And I didn't want these people to get caught up in this separate issue, but I think that we need to, if that's a concern of Randy, if that's a concern,
Turn your mic on.
if that's a concern of Randy and Bob and Kent and Mike, then I think we ought to put together a process to deal with that separately from this.
It's a valid concern. Bob?
Let me just throw this out there because I sort of, let me throw this out there because I sort of listened intently, and Kathy and I haven't even had a chance to talk about this, but it sounds as though at some future meeting, maybe a workshop, committee of the whole meeting, whatever the case might be, we can ask maybe the chairman of the HBC to come forward, because I know that Alderman Moore served on that committee, but their role is very different than the zoning board. And I think in deference to a couple of questions that were asked, I know if you read the testimony from the meeting, they spent a long time talking about one-story versus two-story. And I think that is a policy question, as a couple of you said, that we have to look at these kinds of requests very differently than a zoning request or this request, or we need to significantly alter our ordinances, because that's the way it's currently set up. So I think, you know, we don't have to do this on August 5th, but I think certainly somewhere in the next quarter that we may want to have a workshop meeting to just sort of bring everybody up to speed and say, is the application of our HPC codes the way we want them going forward?
It's a good question. Okay, next item of business, new business. Anything from the council or staff? If not, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Second. All those in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Can I endorse this?
Absolutely.
City,
Can I deposit it in your bank?
City of Chicago by